Some lakes hold water. Lake Willoughby holds something that breathes. The glacial valley that cradles Lake Willoughby sits in Vermont's northeast kingdom, a region so sparsely populated that some towns still lack cell service. The lake itself stretches nearly 5 miles between Mount Pisgah to the east and Mount Hor to the west. Twin peaks that rise over 2,000 feet, their cliffs plunging directly into water so deep that early surveyors couldn't find the bottom with their equipment. The official depth is listed at 308 feet, but that measurement wasn't confirmed until 1963, and even then, the research team noted acoustic interference that made their readings inconsistent. The indigenous Abenaki people called this place the water between walls. They fished its shallows but avoided its center, particularly after dark. French trappers in the 1700s documented similar hesitation among their native guides, though the specific reasons were never recorded. What was recorded in a parish log from 1812 was a priest's observation that the lake produces a light, not of fire nor of heaven, and the sound of a heart that is not one's own. For most of the 19th and 20th centuries, Willoughby remained a quiet destination for summer visitors and ice fishermen. The surrounding towns, Westmore, Barton, Brownington, grew slowly, if at all. The lake's reputation as one of New England's clearest and coldest bodies of water attracted divers in the 1970s, though most confined their explorations to the first 100 feet. Below that, the temperature drops sharply, visibility decreases, and according to one diver's logbook, the pressure feels wrong for the depth. It was in that deeper water, in the autumn of 1947, that the first modern account of the phenomenon emerged. Harold Vance was 53 years old when he rowed out onto Lake Willoughby on the evening of October 9, 1947. A retired machinist from Burlington, Vance had been fishing the lake since childhood and kept meticulous records of his catches, weather conditions, and water clarity. His notebook from that night, now held in a private collection in Montpelier, describes what happened in plain, unadorned language. At approximately 7:45 in the evening, with the sun fully set and a half-moon rising over Mount Hor, Vance noticed a faint blue illumination beneath his boat. He initially attributed it to moonlight refraction, but the glow intensified over the following minutes until he could clearly see it pulsing, a rhythmic brightening and dimming that he estimated occurred once per second, perhaps slightly less. He timed it against his wristwatch and counted 72 pulses per minute. Vance remained anchored above the light for approximately 90 minutes, during which the pulse never varied. When he finally rowed back to shore, he noted feeling peculiar in the chest and discovered he could not locate his own heartbeat by pressing his fingers to his wrist or neck. This sensation persisted for 3 days. A doctor in Barton examined Vance on October 12th and found his pulse to be normal, 68 beats per minute. But Vance insisted he still couldn't feel it. "It's there," he wrote in his notebook, "but it's not mine anymore." He never fished Lake Willoughby again. He died in 1961 of unrelated causes, but his family reported that he checked his pulse obsessively until the end, sometimes dozens of times per day. Vance's account might have remained an isolated curiosity if not for what followed over the subsequent decades. In 1954, a couple from Massachusetts, Bernard and Dorothy Kowalski, reported seeing the same blue glow while camping on the eastern shore. They described it as coming from the center of the lake, deep down, like a slow heartbeat made of light. Bernard, a cardiac nurse, timed the pulse at 72 beats per minute without knowing about Vance's earlier observation. Dorothy later told a reporter from the Caledonian Record that she had experienced a feeling of something listening while watching the light, though she couldn't elaborate further. A fishing guide named Eugene Tremblay witnessed the phenomenon at least 4 times between 1961 and 1973. In a 1975 interview with a University of Vermont folklore researcher, Tremblay described the glow as pale blue, like the pilot light on a gas stove, but softer. He estimated it emanated from a depth of at least 250 feet, based on his knowledge of the lake's topography. When asked if he had experienced any physical sensations, Tremblay paused before answering. "I don't sleep the same anymore," he said. "Not since the 3rd time I saw it. I wake up at the same time every night, 3:17 in the morning, and I can hear my own heartbeat in my ears. It sounds different, like an echo of something." The folklore researcher, Dr. Patricia Lundgren, collected 11 additional accounts between 1975 and 1982. All 11 described the same blue glow. 9 of the 11 timed the pulse at 72 beats per minute. 7 reported lingering sensations related to their heartbeat, an inability to feel it, an awareness of it as external, or a sense that it had been synchronized with something else. Dr. Lundgren's research was never published. According to university records, her project lost funding in 1983 due to methodological concerns. Her field notes were returned to her, but 3 notebooks covering the Lake Willoughby interviews were missing. She filed a formal complaint, which was never resolved. Dr. Lundgren retired in 1991 and declined all subsequent interview requests until her death in 2014. The Vermont Geological Survey conducted a sonar mapping project of Lake Willoughby in 1987, part of a broader initiative to study glacial lake formations in the Northeast Kingdom. The project was led by Dr. Franklin Hooper, a hydrologist with 17 years of experience in freshwater systems. The survey confirmed the lake's maximum depth at 308 feet, but the team encountered significant difficulties with their equipment in the deepest sections. According to the project's final report, sonar returns from below 270 feet were inconsistent and occasionally non-responsive. The report attributed this to sediment composition and thermal layering, though Dr. Hooper's personal notes, obtained through a Freedom of Information request in 2009, tell a different story. Sonar returns show a rhythmic interference pattern at depth, Hooper wrote on August 14, 1987, approximately 1.2 hertz, no geological explanation, equipment checked 3 times, no malfunction. 1.2 hertz translates to 72 pulses per minute. 3 days later, Hooper noted, team member R. Salcedo reported seeing blue light beneath the boat at 2200 hours. I did not observe it. Salcedo has requested reassignment. Ricardo Salcedo, a graduate student at the time, left the project on August 19th. He completed his degree at a different university and has never spoken publicly about his time at Lake Willoughby. Attempts to contact him for this account were unsuccessful. The Geological Survey's final report makes no mention of the interference pattern, the blue light, or Salcedo's departure. When questioned about these omissions in a 2012 interview, Dr. Hooper stated only that certain observations were deemed outside the project's scope before declining further comment. A subsequent survey in 2004, conducted by a private research firm under contract with the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, was abruptly canceled after 2 days. The firm's invoice indicates that equipment was deployed on September 8th and recovered on September 10th, but no data was ever submitted. A spokesperson for the department stated that the survey was postponed indefinitely due to scheduling conflicts. No new survey has been scheduled. Meanwhile, local accounts continue. A 2017 post on a fishing forum described the blue glow in detail, with the author noting that his fitness tracker registered his heart rate as exactly 72 beats per minute for over an hour while he watched, despite his resting rate typically being in the low 60s. He added that for several weeks afterward, he experienced what he called a hollow feeling in my chest, like my heart was beating somewhere else. The post received 3 replies from other users who claimed similar experiences. One wrote simply, "I know exactly what you mean. It's been 4 years, and I still feel like something down there kept a piece of me." Lake Willoughby remains a popular destination for swimmers, kayakers, and divers each summer. The Vermont Department of Tourism makes no mention of the phenomenon in its promotional materials, and most visitors experience nothing unusual. The lake is clear, cold, and beautiful, one of the jewels of the Northeast Kingdom. But fishermen who venture out after dark, particularly in autumn, occasionally return with stories they're reluctant to share. A blue glow, a pulse that matches their own. And afterward, a sensation that something fundamental has shifted, that their heartbeat, though still present, no longer belongs entirely to them. The depth at the center of Lake Willoughby has never been independently verified since 1987. The rhythmic interference pattern documented by Dr. Hooper has never been explained. And the question that Harold Vance asked in his notebook on October 10, 1947, remains unanswered. If what I saw has a heartbeat, what is it waiting for? No one has anchored above that spot after dark in over a decade, not because it's prohibited, simply because those who know about it choose not to. The lake keeps its rhythm. 72 beats per minute, steady, patient, unchanged. And somewhere beneath 300 feet of glacial water, something continues to pulse. The lights above Victory Bog do not flicker. They glide. Victory Bog spreads across nearly 2,000 acres in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom, a vast expanse of peat wetland, stunted black spruce, and standing water that has remained largely unchanged since the last ice age. The bog sits within the Victory Basin Wildlife Management Area, a protected region so remote that the nearest paved road ends 4 miles from its southern edge. The town of Victory itself, population 62 as of the 2020 census, consists of a few scattered homes, a town hall that opens twice monthly, and no commercial businesses of any kind. The bog formed approximately 10,000 years ago when glacial meltwater filled a depression left by retreating ice. Over millennia, layers of sphagnum moss accumulated, creating a floating mat of vegetation that now covers much of the water's surface. Walking on this mat is possible in some areas, but dangerous in others. The boundary between solid ground and open water is often invisible until a foot breaks through. Search and rescue teams have recovered 7 bodies from Victory Bog since 1951, all of them hikers or hunters who strayed from marked trails. The Abenaki called this place the meadow that swallows. Early European settlers avoided it entirely, routing roads and rail lines around its perimeter. A logging operation attempted to drain a portion of the bog in 1893, but abandoned the effort after 2 workers disappeared in a single afternoon. Their bodies were never found. The company's foreman noted in his final report that the men had been working near the bog's center when lights appeared at the tree line and they walked toward them. No further details were recorded. I'm Swaystier. The modern documentation of the Victory Bog lights began on September 14, 2003, when a University of Vermont graduate student named Miranda Okonkwo drove to Victory Basin to conduct fieldwork for her master's thesis on peatland hydrology. She arrived at dusk and planned to collect water samples the following morning, camping overnight at an established site near the bog's eastern edge. At approximately 9:20 in the evening, with heavy cloud cover obscuring the moon and stars, Okonkwo observed a series of amber lights rising from the bog's interior. She initially assumed they were headlights from a distant vehicle, but the lights were not on any road. They were floating above the wetland itself, approximately 15 feet off the ground, moving in what she later described as deliberate, coordinated patterns. In her field notebook, Okonkwo documented 8 lights arranged in a triangular formation drifting slowly northward. Over the course of 40 minutes, the formation shifted, first into a square, then into a shape she struggled to describe. It had 7 sides, she wrote, but the angles were wrong. It looked like geometry that hadn't been invented yet. The lights extinguished simultaneously at 10:17. Okonkwo photographed the phenomenon with her digital camera, but the images showed only faint smears of amber against black. She did not sleep that night. When she reported the sighting to her thesis advisor, Dr. Raymond Hartwell, he dismissed it as swamp gas, methane released from decaying organic matter, a common explanation for unexplained lights in boggy terrain. Okonkwo accepted this explanation initially, but returned to Victory Bog 3 weeks later, on October 5th, and witnessed the lights again. This time she counted 12, arranged in 3 rotating triangles that moved in perfect synchronization. She returned 14 times over the following 6 years. Okonkwo's research file, partially reconstructed from surviving documents and interviews with her colleagues, indicates that she observed the lights on 14 separate occasions between 2003 and 2009. Each sighting occurred on overcast nights between September and November. The lights were always amber, always approximately 15 feet above the bog's surface, and always arranged in geometric formations. What troubled Okonkwo, and what eventually consumed her research, was the precision of the patterns. Swamp gas doesn't form equilateral triangles, she told a fellow graduate student, Marcus Riley, in 2006. It doesn't maintain fixed distances between points. It doesn't rotate at a constant speed for 45 minutes and then stop all at once. Riley accompanied Okonkwo to Victory Bog on November 2, 2006. He confirmed her observations in a signed statement that remains in the university's archives. "I saw 9 lights," he wrote. "They moved like they were connected by invisible rods. The formation was a perfect hexagon. When they extinguished, it was instantaneous, not one by one, but all 9 at the same moment. There was no sound, no smell, just darkness." Riley added a final note. "I felt watched the entire time, not by the lights themselves, but by something behind them, something using them." He never returned to Victory Bog. Okonkwo, however, continued her documentation. By 2008, she had compiled over 200 pages of observations, including detailed sketches of the formations, timestamps accurate to the second, and meteorological data from each sighting. She also collected testimony from 3 local residents who had seen the lights independently: a hunter named Clement Fournier, a retired school teacher named Barbara Jansen, and a Vermont fish and wildlife employee named Douglas Whitmore. Fournier, 71 years old at the time of his interview, told Okonkwo he had seen the lights at least 20 times since 1968. He called them the lanterns and said his grandfather had seen them too in the 1920s. "They're not new," he said. "They've always been here. People just learned not to talk about them." When asked why, Fournier paused. "Because talking about them makes them notice you." In the spring of 2009, Okonkwo submitted a formal proposal to expand her research into a doctoral dissertation. The proposal requested funding for infrared cameras, spectrographic equipment, and a small stipend to hire a research assistant. It was reviewed by a university committee and approved, pending final authorization from the graduate school. That authorization never came. On April 14, 2009, Okonkwo received a letter informing her that her funding had been revoked due to budgetary constraints. The letter was signed by an associate dean she had never met. When she requested a meeting to discuss the decision, her emails went unanswered. When she approached Dr. Hartwell for support, he told her only that certain research directions are not advisable at this time. 2 weeks later, Okonkwo's office was cleaned out by university staff while she was attending a conference in Boston. Her computer was wiped. Her physical files were boxed and shipped to her home address. When the boxes arrived, she discovered that approximately 60 pages of her field notes were missing, and 43 additional pages had been redacted with thick black ink, leaving only fragments of sentences visible. The redactions appeared professional. The ink was uniform. Whoever had done it possessed tools and training beyond a simple marker. Okonkwo filed a formal complaint with the university's Office of Research Integrity. The complaint was acknowledged but never investigated. She contacted the Vermont State Archives, the National Weather Service, and the Federal Aviation Administration, seeking any official records of unusual aerial phenomena in the Victory Basin area. All three agencies responded that no such records existed. In August of 2009, Okonkwo left Vermont. She completed a different doctoral program at a university in the Midwest, focusing on an unrelated topic. She has never published her Victory Bog research and has declined all interview requests regarding the lights. Her surviving field notes, those not redacted, were donated to her family after her father's death in 2019. They remain in private hands. The lights continue to appear. A 2015 report from a wildlife photographer described 8 or 9 orange lights moving across Victory Bog in a shape like a spinning star. A 2018 Reddit post in a paranormal forum included a blurry photograph that the poster claimed showed a formation of lights above the bog arranged in a pattern I can't describe. The post received minimal attention and was eventually deleted by its author. Douglas Whitmore, the fish and wildlife employee who spoke with Okonkwo in 2008, retired in 2016. In a brief telephone conversation in 2021, he confirmed that he still saw the lights occasionally from the access road near the bog's southern boundary. He described them as the same as always, amber, silent, and too precise to be natural. When asked what he believed they were, Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think they're what," he said finally. "I think they're who, and I think they've been trying to tell us something for a very long time." He paused again. "The shapes they make, the triangles, the squares, the ones with too many sides, I think those are words. I think they're speaking, and I think someone somewhere decided we weren't supposed to learn the language." Victory Bog remains open to the public. No signs warn of unusual phenomena. No official agency acknowledges the light's existence. The town of Victory does not discuss them, and the few residents who remember Clément Fournier, who died in 2011, say only that he was a private man who kept to himself. On overcast autumn nights, the bog is silent. The water is still. The black spruce stand motionless against the sky. And somewhere above the floating mat of sphagnum moss, in patterns that have no name, the lanterns continue their slow, deliberate geometry, waiting perhaps for someone to finally understand. The fire above Granville Gulf left no ash, no smoke, and no explanation. Granville Gulf State Reservation occupies a narrow mountain pass in central Vermont, a winding corridor carved by glacial meltwater between the Green Mountains Braintree and Northfield Ranges. Route 100 threads through the Gulf for approximately 6 miles, flanked by steep forested slopes that rise over 1,000 feet on either side. The road is one of the most scenic drives in New England and one of the most isolated. Cell service is non-existent throughout the pass. The nearest town, Granville, has a population of fewer than 300. At the heart of the Gulf, Moss Glen Falls drops nearly 100 feet over a series of granite ledges into a pool that feeds a tributary of the White River. The falls are accessible by a short trail from a roadside parking area, though the trail becomes treacherous in wet conditions and is officially closed after dark. Signs warn visitors of slippery rocks and sudden drop-offs. They do not warn of what happened on the night of August 17, 1971. The Abenaki considered the Gulf a place of passage, not a destination, but a threshold between territories. French colonial maps from the 1760s labeled the area Le Couloir Silencieux, the silent corridor, though no written record explains why. Logging operations in the 1800s avoided the steepest sections of the Gulf, and the few work camps established near the falls were abandoned within months. A foreman's journal from 1874 mentions lights above the water at night, but provides no further detail. The journal was donated to the Vermont Historical Society in 1926. It has not been available for public viewing since 1972. Vermont State Trooper Franklin Beaulieu was 41 years old on the night of August 17, 1971. A 12-year veteran of the force, he was conducting a routine patrol of Route 100 when he observed what he initially believed to be a forest fire above the tree line near Moss Glen Falls. He pulled his cruiser to the shoulder at approximately 10:45 in the evening and radioed dispatch to report the sighting. The dispatch recording, obtained through a public records request in 2016, captures Beaulieu's initial report. "I've got what looks like a fire above the falls at Granville Gulf. White flames, very bright, no smoke visible. Requesting fire response." Dispatch acknowledged and alerted the Granville Volunteer Fire Department. But before any units could respond, Beaulieu radioed again. His voice, according to the dispatcher who took the call, had changed. "Cancel the fire response," he said. "It's not a fire. I don't know what it is. It's not touching anything. It's just hovering." Beaulieu remained on scene for approximately 6 minutes. His written incident report, filed the following morning, describes a white luminescence approximately 40 feet in diameter, stationary at an altitude of roughly 200 feet above the falls. The light, he wrote, appeared to burn without fuel or combustion and cast illumination on the surrounding trees and rock face, but produced no shadows of any kind. At 10:51, the light extinguished. Beaulieu described the cessation as instantaneous, like a switch being turned off. He remained at the scene for another 20 minutes, observing no further activity. His report concluded with a recommendation that the incident be classified as an unexplained atmospheric phenomenon. Someone at the state police barracks, the signature is illegible, stamped the report atmospheric disturbance and filed it. No follow-up investigation was conducted. Trooper Beaulieu was not alone that night. Approximately 2 miles north of the falls, a couple from New Hampshire, Gregory and Elaine Matsumoto, had pulled off Route 100 to consult a map. They were traveling to Burlington and had missed a turn near Hancock. At approximately 10:45, Elaine noticed a white glow above the southern tree line. Gregory initially dismissed it as lightning, but Elaine insisted it was stationary. They watched for what Gregory later estimated as 4 or 5 minutes. In a written statement provided to a researcher in 1987, he described the light as pure white, almost painful to look at directly, and noted that it seemed to pulse slightly, like a heartbeat, but very slow. Elaine's statement, provided separately, included a detail her husband did not mention. "There was a shape inside the light," she wrote. "I could see the outline of something, not solid, but like a structure made of light itself. It had angles. It was deliberate." She included a sketch, a 7-sided figure with internal divisions that resembled a crystalline lattice. The Matsumoto couple divorced in 1973. Gregory moved to Arizona. Elaine relocated to coastal Maine. Neither returned to Vermont. A third witness emerged in 1974 when a seasonal employee at a nearby ski resort mentioned the incident to a co-worker. His name was Dennis Oberg, and he had been hiking alone near the Gulf on the evening in question. He had seen the light from a ridge approximately half a mile east of the falls. Oberg's account, recorded in a letter he sent to the Rutland Herald in 1975, a letter that was never published, described the phenomenon in clinical terms. A luminous mass, white in color, approximately 30 to 50 feet in width, stationary above Moss Glen Falls, he wrote. Duration, 6 minutes. No sound, no heat detectable at my distance, no apparent source. Like Elaine Matsumoto, Oberg reported seeing a shape within the light. His letter included a sketch. The sketch was identical to Elaine's, a 7-sided figure with the same internal lattice structure. Oberg had never met the Matsumoto couple. He had no knowledge of their account. Dennis Oberg left Vermont in December of 1975. He told his employer he was moving to be closer to family. His forwarding address was in Oregon. All subsequent attempts to contact him have been unsuccessful. In 1986, a professor of atmospheric science at Middlebury College named Dr. Helen Raskova requested access to Trooper Beaulieu's original incident report as part of a broader study on unusual meteorological events in Vermont. Her request was denied without explanation. She filed a formal appeal citing the Vermont Public Records Act. The appeal was acknowledged but never resolved. After 14 months of correspondence with the state police, Dr. Raskova received a letter stating that the report in question could not be located in current archives. Beaulieu himself had retired in 1982. Dr. Raskova tracked him to a small town in the Florida Panhandle and conducted a telephone interview in 1988. The recording of that interview, preserved in Middlebury's special collections, reveals a man who had spent 17 years trying to forget what he saw. I've told the story maybe 5 times in my life, Beaulieu said. Every time I tell it, I remember more, and I don't want to remember more. When Dr. Raskova asked him to describe the light in detail, Beaulieu hesitated. It wasn't just light, he said finally. There was something inside it, a structure, like a blueprint for something that hadn't been built yet. I saw angles that didn't make sense. I saw geometry that shouldn't exist. He paused. I saw it for 6 minutes. And for 6 minutes, I understood something. I don't know what. But I understood it completely. And then the light went out, and I forgot. I forgot everything except that I had understood. Dr. Raskova asked if he had ever drawn what he saw. Once, he said. In '72, I showed it to a colleague. He got very quiet. Then he asked me to destroy it. Did you? Yes. Do you remember what it looked like? Another pause, longer this time. 7 sides, Beaulieu said, and lines inside, like a web or a circuit. It was the same thing everyone sees, everyone who sees the light. We all see the same thing. The interview ended shortly after. Beaulieu died in 1994. His personal papers were destroyed per his instructions. Dr. Raskova continued her research intermittently until her retirement in 2004. She never published her findings on the Granville Gulf incident, citing insufficient documentation. But in a 2001 interview with a graduate student, she admitted that her reasons were more personal. I found 3 independent sketches, she said. Beaulieu's description matched them. 7 sides. The same internal structure. 3 people who never met, who saw the light from different locations, who drew the same thing. She shook her head. That's not atmospheric science. That's not meteorology. I don't know what that is, and I decided I didn't want to know. Moss Glen Falls remains a popular hiking destination. The parking area fills quickly on summer weekends, and families photograph the cascade from the viewing platform at the base of the trail. The forest is dense and green. The water is clear and cold. At night, Route 100 is empty. The Gulf is silent. The falls continue their descent over ancient granite, unchanged. No official record acknowledges the incident of August 17, 1971. The state police file remains missing. The 3 witnesses are scattered or dead. And the 7-sided shape they drew independently, identically, impossibly, exists only in fragments, a letter never published, an interview tape in a college archive, and the memories of a researcher who chose not to look further. Some questions are not meant to be answered, some fires are not meant to be explained, and some shapes, glimpsed for 6 minutes in a light that casts no shadow, are not meant to be remembered. But they are remembered by everyone who sees them, always the same, always 7 sides, always waiting inside the light. Every March 15th, the schoolhouse remembers. Grafton, Vermont is often described as one of the best preserved villages in New England. Its white clapboard buildings, covered bridge, and meticulously maintained town center attract thousands of visitors each year, drawn by a vision of rural America frozen in the 19th century. The Wyndham Foundation, a private organization, has spent decades restoring the village to an idealized version of its past, a past of general stores, cheesemakers, and church suppers. But Kidder Hill Road is not on the tourist maps. The road climbs northeast from the village center, narrowing as it ascends into the forested hills that surround Grafton. Pavement gives way to gravel after the first mile. After the second, the gravel becomes rutted dirt, passable only in dry weather. There are no homes on the upper stretch of Kidder Hill Road, only cellar holes, stone walls consumed by forest, and a single structure that has stood since 1847, a one-room schoolhouse that served the children of Grafton's Hill Farms until the morning of March 15, 1952. On that date, the school was closed permanently. The official reason, recorded in the Grafton Town Report for that year, was declining enrollment. 7 students had attended the previous term. None enrolled for the following year. The building was shuttered, its contents removed, its deed transferred to the town. The report does not mention what happened during the final week of classes. It does not mention why the teacher, a woman named Harriet Vance, left Grafton immediately afterward and never returned. It does not mention the 13 parents who signed a petition demanding the school's closure, a petition that was granted within 48 hours. The report does not mention any of this, but the people of Grafton remember. The first documented observation of the green light occurred on March 15, 1967, exactly 15 years after the school's closure. A Grafton resident named Walter Erickson was driving home from a town meeting when he noticed an unusual glow emanating from the hillside above. Erickson, a practical man who had served in the Army Corps of Engineers, initially assumed someone had broken into the abandoned schoolhouse with a lantern. He drove up Kidder Hill Road to investigate. What he found, according to a statement he provided to the Grafton Historical Society in 1981, defied explanation. The windows were glowing, Erickson said. A pale green light, steady, not flickering. I could see it clearly from the road. I got out of my truck and walked closer. The door was still padlocked, same lock that had been there for years, but the light was coming from inside. Erickson circled the building. All 4 windows displayed the same luminescence. He pressed his hand against the exterior wall and felt nothing unusual. No heat, no vibration. But when he approached the front window and looked inside, he saw only darkness. The light was in the windows themselves, he said, not behind them. It was like the glass was glowing. And the air around the building was cold, much colder than it should have been. My breath was visible, and it was March. Cold, sure, but not that cold. Erickson left without entering. He reported the incident to the town select board the following day. His report was received politely and never discussed again. He returned to the schoolhouse on March 15, 1968. The light was there. He returned in 1969, 1970, and every year until his death in 1993. The light was always there. In 1984, a physicist named Dr. Samuel Lindbergh, on sabbatical from MIT, rented a farmhouse in Grafton to work on a book about rural electrification. He heard about the schoolhouse from a neighbor and dismissed it as local folklore until March 15th of that year, when curiosity drove him up Kidder Hill Road. Dr. Lindbergh brought instruments, a thermometer, a Geiger counter, a magnetometer, and a camera loaded with high-speed film. What he recorded that night became the subject of a paper he never published. The light appeared at precisely 8:17 in the evening, the exact time, according to historical records, that classes had ended each day at the Kidder Hill School. Dr. Lindbergh photographed the phenomenon from multiple angles. The images showed a distinct green luminescence in each of the 4 windows, with no visible source. His thermometer registered an ambient temperature of 38 degrees Fahrenheit at the roadside. When he approached the building, the temperature dropped steadily. At the front door, his thermometer read exactly 32 degrees, the freezing point of water. The temperature was precise, he wrote in his notes. Not 31, not 33, exactly 32. I checked the calibration 3 times. The instrument was functioning correctly. His Geiger counter showed no unusual radiation. His magnetometer registered a faint anomaly, a fluctuation in the local magnetic field that pulsed at regular intervals. Dr. Lindbergh timed the pulses. They occurred once every 4 seconds, 15 per minute. He found the number significant, but could not explain why. Dr. Lindbergh attempted to enter the building through a rear window that had partially rotted. As he lifted the sash, the green light extinguished instantly. The temperature rose. His magnetometer returned to baseline readings. He waited for an hour. The light did not return. It knew I was trying to get in, he wrote. That's an unscientific statement. I know that, but that's what it felt like. It knew, and it stopped. The most comprehensive investigation of the Kidder Hill phenomenon was conducted between 2001 and 2008 by a graduate student in folklore studies named Yuki Anderson. Her thesis, which examined unexplained light phenomena in rural New England, devoted 43 pages to the Grafton schoolhouse. Anderson collected 17 eyewitness accounts spanning 5 decades. All described the same green luminescence. All reported the temperature drop. Several mentioned a sound, not audible in the conventional sense, but felt, like a pressure in the ears. It was like a hum you hear with your bones, said Margaret Trudeau, who witnessed the light in 1989. Not loud, just present. Like the building was vibrating at a frequency too low to hear. Anderson also obtained documents related to the school's closure. Town records from 1952 were sparse, but she located the petition signed by 13 parents. The petition's language was unusual. It did not cite declining enrollment or structural concerns. It stated only that the continued operation of the Kidder Hill School poses an unacceptable risk to the welfare of our children and demanded immediate closure. No explanation of the risk was provided. No incident report accompanied the petition. The school was closed within 2 days. Anderson attempted to trace the families who had signed. Of the 13 signatories, 9 had left Grafton within 2 years of the closure. Their descendants, when located, declined to comment or claimed no knowledge of the events. The teacher, Harriet Vance, proved more difficult to trace. Anderson eventually located a death certificate in Spokane, Washington, dated 1987. Vance had never married, never taught again, and left no personal papers. A brief obituary described her as a private woman who valued her solitude. But Anderson found one additional document, a letter Vance had written to a cousin in 1953, approximately 1 year after leaving Grafton. The letter was preserved in a private collection and made available to Anderson under condition of anonymity. I cannot write about what happened in the school, Vance wrote. I can only tell you that it happened and that I was responsible, though I did not understand what I was doing. The children saw something I could not see. They heard something I could not hear. And on the last day, when I finally heard it too, I understood why they were afraid. She continued, "The sound comes from the walls. It comes from the floor. It comes from the glass in the windows. It is not a voice. It is a frequency. And once you hear it, you cannot stop hearing it. Even now, 1,000 miles away, I hear it every night at 8:17. I will hear it until I die." The letter ended there. No further correspondence between Vance and her cousin has been found. In 2012, the town of Grafton quietly transferred ownership of the Kidder Hill Schoolhouse to the Wyndham Foundation. The foundation conducted a structural assessment and determined that the building, while deteriorated, was not in danger of collapse. No restoration was planned. No public access was permitted. A foundation spokesperson, when asked about the property in 2015, stated only that the structure is being preserved for historical purposes and declined to elaborate. But the preservation efforts have included one unusual measure. In 2013, the foundation installed a small weather station on the schoolhouse property, connected to a satellite uplink. The station records temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure at 15-minute intervals. A former foundation employee, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that the data for March 15th of each year shows a consistent anomaly. Between 8:15 and 8:45 in the evening, the temperature sensor registers exactly 32 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of the ambient temperature elsewhere on the property. It could be 20 degrees outside, or it could be 50, the employee said. The sensor at the schoolhouse reads 32 every year, same 20-minute window. The employee also mentioned a secondary sensor that was installed and later removed. It was an infrasound detector, they said. Measures frequencies below the range of human hearing. I saw the data once from March 2014. There was a spike at 8:17, a sustained tone at 15 hertz. 15 hertz. One cycle every 4 seconds, 15 pulses per minute. The same interval Dr. Lindbergh had measured 30 years earlier. They removed the sensor in 2015, the employee said. I asked why. No one would tell me. The Kidder Hill Schoolhouse stands where it has always stood. The road is impassable for much of the winter and rarely traveled in any season. The windows are dark for 364 days of the year, dusty glass reflecting only forest and sky. But on March 15th, as the evening settles over Grafton's hills, the glass begins to glow, a pale green luminescence, steady and cold, 32 degrees inside, regardless of the weather. A frequency felt rather than heard, pulsing 15 times per minute, matching nothing in the natural world. No one enters, no one investigates. The town does not speak of it. The foundation does not acknowledge it. And somewhere in the archives, a letter from a woman who fled 1,000 miles to escape a sound she could never stop hearing reminds us that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Harriet Vance heard the frequency for 35 years before she died. The schoolhouse has been broadcasting for 73, and every March 15th at 8:17 in the evening, it remembers the day it was silenced and refuses to stay silent. The Notch does not forgive those who linger. Smuggler's Notch is a narrow mountain pass in northern Vermont, a jagged corridor carved between Mount Mansfield and Spruce Peak by glacial forces over 10,000 years ago. The pass rises to an elevation of 2,162 feet, flanked by sheer cliff faces that tower nearly 1,000 feet on either side. Massive boulders, some the size of houses, litter the roadbed, remnants of ancient rock slides that closed the original path and forced the construction of a winding route through the debris. Route 108 threads through the Notch in a series of hairpin turns so severe that trailers, buses, and commercial vehicles are prohibited. In winter, the road closes entirely, buried under snow and ice from November through May. Even in summer, fog descends without warning, reducing visibility to mere feet. The notch has claimed lives: hikers who misjudged the terrain, drivers who misjudged the curves, climbers who misjudged the rock. The name itself speaks to the pass's history of concealment. During the War of 1812, smugglers used the treacherous route to transport goods between the United States and Canada, evading customs officers who dared not follow. During Prohibition, bootleggers carried whiskey through the same corridor. The notch has always been a place of passage for those who did not wish to be seen, but some who pass through the notch see things they cannot explain, and some, according to accounts spanning more than a century, lose time they cannot recover. The earliest documented account of the light phenomenon dates to 1891, recorded in the journal of a surveyor named Thomas Aldrich. Aldrich was part of a team mapping the Green Mountains for the state of Vermont, and his work required him to traverse Smuggler's Notch on foot during the autumn months. On the evening of October 3, 1891, Aldrich entered the notch alone to retrieve equipment left at a survey station near the summit. The sun had set, but a full moon provided sufficient light for navigation. He expected the journey to take 45 minutes. It took 4 hours. In his journal, Aldrich described encountering a pillar of pale fire approximately halfway through the notch, positioned between the cliff faces at the narrowest point of the pass. The light, he wrote, was the color of weak tea and stood perfectly vertical, extending from the ground to a height he estimated at 60 feet. It made no sound. It cast no shadow. It simply existed, motionless in the center of the path. Aldrich watched the light for what he believed was 2 or 3 minutes. Then it vanished, not fading, but disappearing instantaneously, as if a door had closed. When he reached the far side of the notch, he checked his pocket watch. It was 11:47 in the evening. He had entered the notch at 7:15. Nearly 4.5 hours had passed, though he had no memory of anything beyond the few minutes he spent observing the light. His journal entry concludes, "I cannot account for the missing time. I was not asleep. I was not injured. I simply was not present, though my body continued through the pass. Something held me, or held my attention, or held time itself. I do not know which." Aldrich completed his survey work and returned to Montpelier. He never entered Smuggler's Notch again. The phenomenon remained largely unrecorded for the next several decades, though oral histories collected in the 1970s suggest it was known to local residents. Farmers in the Cambridge and Stowe areas referred to the light as the lantern, and parents warned children not to walk through the notch after dark. The warnings were practical. The terrain was dangerous, but the specificity of the language suggested something more. "Don't watch the lantern," one elderly resident recalled being told as a child in the 1930s. "If you see it, close your eyes and keep walking. Don't stop, don't count." The meaning of "don't count" was never explained. Modern documentation began in 1978, when a hiking club from Burlington organized a night traverse of the Notch as a Halloween adventure. 14 members participated. 11 completed the hike without incident. 3 did not. The 3, Patricia Bowen, her husband Malcolm, and a friend named Christopher Johansson, became separated from the group near the summit of the pass. According to their later statements, they stopped to rest on a boulder and observed a vertical column of pale yellow light appear approximately 200 feet ahead of them. Patricia Bowen timed the phenomenon with her wristwatch. It lasted exactly 90 seconds. "We didn't speak while it was happening," she told a reporter from the Burlington Free Press in 1979. "We just watched. It felt like watching something we weren't supposed to see, like walking in on a private moment, but we couldn't look away." When the light disappeared, the 3 hikers continued through the notch. They caught up with their group at the parking area on the Cambridge side, but the group had been waiting for nearly 2 hours. "They said we'd been gone for 3 hours," Malcolm Bowen stated. "We thought it had been 20 minutes, maybe 30. We had no explanation." Christopher Johansson noticed something else. His digital watch, a new Casio model he had purchased the previous week, displayed the wrong date. The hike had taken place on October 28th. His watch read October 31st, 3 days in the future. Johansson reset the watch and dismissed it as a malfunction. But when he returned home, he found that his answering machine contained messages dated October 29th and 30th, messages he had no memory of receiving. In 1992, a professor of physics at the University of Vermont named Dr. Ingrid Halvorsen conducted an informal investigation of the smuggler's notch phenomenon. Dr. Halvorsen specialized in electromagnetic field theory and had read about the 1978 incident in a compilation of New England folklore. She visited the notch on 3 occasions during the autumn of 1992, equipped with magnetometers, spectrometers, and synchronized atomic clocks. On her 3rd visit, November 14th, she observed the light. Her field notes, preserved in the university's archives, describe the event in precise technical language. Luminous column observed at approximately 21:45 hours, positioned at coordinates subsequently determined to be 44 degrees, 57.3 degrees north, 72 degrees, 79.3 degrees west. Column appeared instantaneously with no visible source or ignition point. Coloration consistent with sodium emission spectrum, approximately 589 nanometers. Height estimated at 18 to 20 meters. Duration 90 seconds exactly. Measured by atomic clock. Column extinguished instantaneously at 21:46 and 30 seconds. Dr. Halvorsen noted that her magnetometer registered a significant anomaly during the event, a localized distortion in the Earth's magnetic field centered on the column's position. The distortion was not consistent with any known geological or atmospheric phenomenon. More troubling was her atomic clock data. Upon returning to the laboratory, she wrote, I compared my portable atomic clock with the reference clock maintained by the physics department. The portable clock was running 7.3 seconds ahead of the reference. This discrepancy is not possible under normal operating conditions. Atomic clocks do not gain time. Dr. Halvorsen conducted 2 additional visits to the notch, but the light did not reappear. She wrote a brief paper describing her observations and submitted it to a journal specializing in geophysical anomalies. The paper was rejected without peer review. The rejection letter stated only that the observations described are not consistent with established physical principles. She did not resubmit. The most recent documented incident occurred on September 18, 2019, when a solo hiker named Marcus Oyalaran attempted a sunset traverse of the notch. Oyalaran, an amateur photographer, was hoping to capture images of the autumn foliage against the cliff faces. He entered the notch at approximately 6:30 in the evening. The sun set at 6:52. At 7:15, according to the timestamp on his camera, Oyalaran photographed a vertical column of light positioned between the cliff faces. The image shows a pale yellow luminescence, slightly overexposed, with no visible source. The exposure data indicates a 90-second shutter duration, far longer than Oyalaran had intended. I don't remember taking that photograph, he later wrote, in an online forum dedicated to unexplained phenomena. I remember seeing the light. I remember wanting to photograph it, but I don't remember pressing the shutter. I don't remember the 90 seconds passing. I just remember the light being gone and my camera telling me I had taken a picture. Oyalaran exited the notch at approximately 8:45, 90 minutes later than his expected arrival time at the far parking area. His phone, which had been fully charged when he entered, was dead. When he connected it to a charger, it displayed a date of September 21st, 3 days in the future. The phone's internal log showed no activity between September 18th and September 21st. It simply skipped forward, as if those 3 days had never existed. O'Yeleran reset the phone and attempted to dismiss the incident, but he found himself unable to sleep on the nights of September 19th and 20th. He described a sensation of waiting for something to catch up, a feeling that dissipated only on September 21st when the calendar finally matched what his phone had shown. "I think I lived those 3 days," he wrote, "somewhere, in the notch, or wherever the light comes from. I just don't remember them, and I don't think I'm supposed to." Smuggler's Notch remains one of Vermont's most popular scenic destinations. Thousands of vehicles navigate its hairpin turns each summer. Hikers traverse its trails without incident. Climbers scale its cliffs and return to tell their friends. But the pass is closed after dark. The official reason is safety. The road is treacherous, the terrain unforgiving, the risk of accident too great. No signs mention the light. No warnings speak of lost time. No official record acknowledges that anything unusual has ever occurred between the cliffs. Yet the stories persist. A pale yellow column, perfectly vertical, appearing without warning at the narrowest point of the pass. 90 seconds exactly, no more, no less. And afterward, for those who stop to watch, a gap in memory, a discrepancy in time, a sense that something fundamental has shifted. Thomas Aldrich lost 4 hours in 1891. The Burlington Hiking Club lost 3 hours in 1978. Marcus O'Yeleran lost 3 days in 2019, or gained them, depending on how you measure. The light appears in the same location every time. It lasts exactly 90 seconds every time. It vanishes the moment anyone tries to approach. And somewhere in that corridor between peaks, in the notch that has always been a place of passage for those who do not wish to be seen, time moves differently. Perhaps it always has. Perhaps the smugglers who gave the pass its name knew this. Perhaps they counted on it. And perhaps the light is not an anomaly at all. Perhaps it is a door. And perhaps every 90 seconds someone is stepping through. The figures in the photographs have never been explained. Spectacle Pond lies in the northeast corner of Vermont, within the town of Brighton in Essex County. The pond covers approximately 100 acres, fed by underground springs and drained by a small outlet stream that eventually reaches the Nilhegan River. Its name derives from its shape, 2 roughly circular basins connected by a narrow channel resembling a pair of spectacles when viewed from above. The surrounding land is among the least populated in New England. Brighton's year-round population hovers around 1,200, spread across nearly 60 square miles of forest, wetland, and scattered homesteads. The nearest major road, Route 105, passes several miles to the south. There are no commercial facilities at Spectacle Pond, no boat launches, no maintained trails. Those who visit must navigate unmarked logging roads and private property. The Abenaki knew this place by a name that translates roughly as the water that watches. French Jesuit missionaries who passed through the region in the 1730s recorded the name but offered no interpretation. A surveyor's map from 1856 notes the pond's unusual clarity, visibility extending to depths of 30 feet or more, and mentions that local guides refused to camp on its shores. No written explanation for this refusal exists. But the oral tradition of the region, preserved in fragments and half-remembered stories, suggests that something about Spectacle Pond unsettled those who knew it best. Something that appeared only once a year, something that could only be seen through glass. The first documented observation of the silver hour phenomenon was recorded on June 21, 1923, by a wildlife photographer named Alma Lindqvist. Lindqvist had traveled to the Northeast Kingdom to document nesting waterfowl for a natural history publication based in Boston. She arrived at Spectacle Pond before dawn on the summer solstice, hoping to capture images of loons in the early morning light. She set up her camera, a large format field model requiring glass plate negatives, on the eastern shore, and waited. At 4:17 in the morning, 11 minutes before the official sunrise time of 4:28, the surface of the pond began to glow. Lindqvist described the phenomenon in her field journal. A silver luminescence, rising from the water itself, not reflected from the sky. The light was diffuse but concentrated over the center of the pond. It lasted approximately 15 minutes before fading with the arrival of true dawn. She exposed 3 glass plates during the event. When developed, the images showed something Lindqvist had not observed with her naked eyes. Figures, 7 of them, standing on the water's surface in a loose semicircle, facing the eastern shore. The figures were translucent, their outlines indistinct but unmistakably human in form. They appeared to be wearing long garments, robes or cloaks, that obscured their features. They cast no reflections. They left no ripples. Lindqvist examined the plates repeatedly, searching for evidence of double exposure or light leakage. She found none. The images were technically flawless. The figures were simply there. She never published the photographs. She never returned to Spectacle Pond. Her field journal, donated to the Vermont Historical Society after her death in 1961, contains a final note on the incident. "I do not know what I photographed. I only know that it was real, and I know that it saw me watching." The phenomenon was observed again on June 21, 1937, by a fishing guide named Roland Thibodeau. Thibodeau had brought a client to Spectacle Pond for early morning trout fishing and witnessed the silver luminescence from a rowboat positioned near the pond center. In an interview conducted by a folklorist in 1972, Thibodeau recalled the experience. "The light came up from below, not from the sky, from the water. Silver, like moonlight. But there was no moon. It was bright enough to read by, but soft, not harsh. It lasted maybe 10-15 minutes. Thibodeau did not see any figures, but his client, a businessman from Montreal named Jean-Pierre Gagnon, brought a camera and took several photographs during the event. The photographs, which remained in Gagnon's family until 2004, show the same phenomenon Lindqvist had documented 14 years earlier: translucent human figures standing on the water. This time, there were 9. Gagnon never spoke publicly about the photographs. According to his daughter, who donated the images to a private collector after her father's death, he kept them locked in a safe deposit box for the rest of his life. He told her only that some things should not be explained. The collector who acquired the photographs has declined all requests for access. Between 1941 and 1989, the phenomenon was observed at least 11 additional times, always on the summer solstice, always beginning at 4:17 in the morning. The witnesses included hunters, fishermen, campers, and at least 2 professional researchers, a biologist studying amphibian populations and a geologist surveying mineral deposits. The accounts are remarkably consistent. The silver luminescence rises from the pond's surface approximately 11 minutes before sunrise. It lasts between 12 and 18 minutes. It produces no sound, no heat, no measurable radiation. And it reveals, to cameras, but not to the naked eye, figures standing on the water. The number of figures varies. Lindqvist saw 7. Gagnon photographed 9. A hiker in 1958 counted 12 in his photographs. A wildlife biologist in 1974 captured an image showing 17. No photograph has ever shown fewer than 7 figures. No figure has ever been identified. In 1983, a retired engineer named Oscar Brandt attempted a systematic study of the phenomenon. Brandt, who had witnessed the silver hour in 1961, returned to Spectacle Pond every summer solstice for 7 consecutive years, equipped with multiple cameras, infrared sensors, and audio recording equipment. His findings, compiled in a self-published monograph in 1990, are the most detailed analysis of the phenomenon available. Brandt confirmed that the luminescence began at precisely 4:17 each year, never earlier, never later. He documented the temperature of the water during the event and found it dropped by exactly 4 degrees Fahrenheit over the course of the phenomenon, regardless of ambient conditions. He measured no unusual electromagnetic activity, no changes in atmospheric pressure, no fluctuations in background radiation, but his photographs showed the figures, every year, standing in the same general arrangement, facing the eastern shore. "They are waiting," Brandt wrote in his conclusion. "That is the only interpretation I can offer. They appear at the same moment each year, in the same place, facing the same direction. They are waiting for something, or someone." He added a note that has puzzled researchers ever since. "The figures do not cast shadows, but in my 1987 photographs, I noticed something I had missed before. The figures do not cast shadows, but something behind them does." Brandt did not elaborate. He died in 1992, and his original photographs have never been located. The most troubling account comes from 1996, when a photographer named Vivian Okonkwo traveled to Spectacle Pond specifically to document the phenomenon. Okonkwo had read Brandt's monograph and was determined to capture high-quality images using modern equipment. She arrived on June 20th and camped on the eastern shore. At 4:15 on the morning of the solstice, she positioned 3 cameras on tripods, 2 film cameras and 1 early digital model, and waited. The silver luminescence appeared on schedule. Okonkwo photographed it continuously for 18 minutes. When the light faded, she reviewed her digital images immediately. The figures were there, 11 of them, standing on the water in their familiar semicircle, but one of the figures was different. In every previous photograph, the figures had been translucent and indistinct, their features obscured by their garments and the diffuse quality of the light. In Okonkwo's images, 10 of the figures matched this description. The 11th was facing the camera directly. Its features were visible. It was Okonkwo herself. She recognized her own face, her own posture, her own clothing, the jacket she had been wearing on the shore while taking the photographs. But the figure in the image was standing on the water 50 yards from shore, among the others. Okonkwo left Spectacle Pond within the hour. She developed her film negatives at a professional laboratory in Burlington. They showed the same image, her face, her body, standing among the figures. She has never returned to the pond. She has never spoken publicly about the incident. The digital images were deleted. The film negatives were destroyed. A colleague who spoke with her in 2002 reported that Okonkwo described feeling already there during the event, a sensation of being in 2 places simultaneously, of watching herself from across the water while also standing on the shore. She said she could feel them seeing through her eyes, the colleague recalled, like they were using her to look at themselves, and she said she knew somehow that she would be in the photographs before she even took them. Spectacle Pond remains accessible to those willing to navigate the unmarked roads that lead to its shores. It is not protected land. It is not monitored. It is simply forgotten, a small body of water in a sparsely populated corner of a sparsely populated state. The summer solstice comes each year as it always has. The sunrise on that date occurs at approximately 4:28 in the morning, give or take a minute, depending on the year. And 11 minutes before sunrise, at 4:17 exactly, the water begins to glow. No one knows why. No one knows who the figures are, or were, or will be. No one knows why cameras can see them when eyes cannot. No one knows why Vivian Okonkwo appeared among them in 1996, or whether others have appeared and simply never recognized themselves. The figures stand on the water. They face the eastern shore. They wait. And somewhere in the silver light of that impossible hour, in photographs that have been hidden and lost and destroyed, the line between witness and witnessed blurs. Alma Lindqvist wrote that the phenomenon saw her watching. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps that is what the figures are, not ghosts, not spirits, not memories, just watchers, waiting for someone to finally watch back. The light does not move. It waits. Devil's Gulch is a narrow passage through fractured bedrock in the town of Eden, Vermont, carved into the western slope of Belvedere Mountain. The gulch extends approximately 100 yards through a cleft in the metamorphic rock, its walls rising 40 to 60 feet on either side and narrowing in places to barely 3 feet across. The Long Trail, Vermont's oldest long-distance hiking path, passes directly through the formation, requiring hikers to navigate moss-covered boulders and occasional standing water. The geological origins of the gulch are well documented. Approximately 450 million years ago, tectonic forces fractured the ancient seafloor that would become the Green Mountains. Subsequent glaciation widened the crack and deposited the massive boulders that now litter its floor. The result is a passage that feels less like a natural formation and more like a wound in the earth, a place where the mountain was broken and never fully healed. The town of Eden lies to the west, a community of approximately 1,300 residents scattered across farms and wooded homesteads. The town has no center, no main street, no commercial district. It exists in the interstices between more established settlements, a place defined more by what it lacks than what it contains. Devil's Gulch has been called by that name since at least 1847, when it first appeared on a survey map. The surveyor's notes offer no explanation for the designation. Local oral tradition attributes the name to a farmer who claimed to have seen the Devil's Own Lantern burning within the rock walls on a night in 1839. No written record of this sighting exists, but the stories persisted, and in 1951 someone finally wrote one down. Miss Eleanor Swanson was 73 years old when she agreed to an interview with a graduate student from the University of Vermont in the autumn of 1951. The student, whose thesis examined folk beliefs in rural Vermont, recorded their conversation on a portable wire recorder. The recording survives in the university's archives, though portions are degraded. Swanson had lived in Eden her entire life. Her family had farmed the same land since 1862. She spoke matter-of-factly about the gulch, describing it as a place that holds things, without elaborating on what she meant. When pressed, she recounted an experience from her youth, an evening in the summer of 1904 when she was 26 years old. "I was walking back from the Belvedere settlement," she said. "Took the trail through the gulch because it was faster. The sun was down, but there was still light in the sky, and when I came to the narrow part, I saw it." She described a soft orange glow suspended between the rock walls, approximately 10 feet above the gulch floor. The light was motionless. It did not flicker or pulse. It simply existed, filling the space between the walls like water in a vessel. "I should have turned back," Swanson said, "but I didn't. I walked into it." The recording becomes difficult to hear at this point. When it clears, Swanson is describing what she heard inside the light. "My own voice, speaking words I hadn't spoken, saying things I didn't understand. It was me. I knew my own voice. But the words were wrong. They hadn't happened yet." She paused before continuing. "3 days later, I said those words, every one of them, to my sister on the porch of our farmhouse. I remembered them the moment they came out of my mouth. I had already heard myself say them in the gulch. 3 days before, I knew I would. Swanson refused to elaborate on the content of the conversation. She stated only that it concerned a death in the family, and that she had been powerless to change the outcome, despite knowing it was coming. "The gulch doesn't show you the future," she said. "It holds the future, and sometimes it lets you hear it early, but hearing it doesn't help. It just means you live it twice." The phenomenon Swanson described was not unique to her experience. Between 1951 and 2014, at least 17 additional accounts were recorded by researchers, journalists, and amateur investigators. The details vary in specifics, but share essential characteristics. The light is always described as orange, not red, not yellow, but a distinct amber orange that witnesses compare to firelight or autumn leaves. It appears between the rock walls of the narrow section of the gulch, suspended above the ground, motionless. It does not illuminate the surrounding stone in the way a normal light source would. Instead, it seems contained, as if the walls themselves are holding it in place. And those who enter the light hear voices, always their own voices, always speaking words they do not recognize, always words they will later speak in conversations they cannot predict. A logger named Henrik Gustafsson encountered the light in 1967. He reported hearing himself arguing with his foreman about a boundary dispute, an argument that occurred verbatim 2 weeks later when a property survey revealed an error in the logging company's maps. A hiker from Massachusetts named Deborah Carlisle entered the gulch during a solo backpacking trip in 1983. She heard herself delivering what she later described as a eulogy for someone I loved. Her father died 7 months later. She delivered the eulogy at his funeral, recognizing every word. A wildlife biologist named Samuel Achterberg documented his experience in a private journal in 1996. He heard himself speaking to a doctor about options and timelines. 8 months later, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The conversation with his oncologist matched what he had heard in the gulch, word for word. "I tried to say something different," Achterberg wrote. "When I realized it was the same conversation, I tried to change the words. I couldn't. They came out exactly as I had heard them. It was like reading from a script I didn't know I had memorized." Achterberg died in 1997. His journal was donated to a private collection and has not been made publicly available. In 2008, a physicist and amateur folklorist named Dr. Miriam Ostrowski visited Devil's Gulch to investigate the phenomenon. Dr. Ostrowski had read several accounts of the held light and was intrigued by the consistency of the reports, particularly the claim that the light appeared to violate causality by allowing witnesses to hear future conversations. She visited the gulch on 7 occasions over 2 years without observing the phenomenon. On her 8th visit, October 14, 2010, she encountered the light. Her account, published in a small journal dedicated to anomalous phenomena, describes the experience in careful, measured language. At approximately 1830 hours, while traversing the narrow section of the gulch, I observed a luminous phenomenon suspended between the rock walls. The light was amber-orange in color, diffuse but distinct, occupying a volume I estimated at roughly 4 cubic meters. It was motionless and appeared to have no source. Dr. Ostrowski entered the light. "I heard a voice I recognized as my own," she wrote. "The words were unclear at first, as if heard through water. Then they resolved into a conversation. I was speaking to someone, a woman, based on the responses, about a manuscript, about changes that needed to be made, about a deadline." She did not recognize the conversation. She had no pending manuscripts, no editorial deadlines. "I remained in the light for approximately 90 seconds, she continued. The conversation looped 3 times, repeating identically. When I exited, the light extinguished immediately. 14 months later, in December of 2011, Dr. Ostrowski received an unexpected offer to contribute a chapter to an academic anthology. The editor was a woman she had never met. Their first phone conversation, discussing revisions and deadlines, matched what she had heard in the Gulch. Every word she wrote in a follow-up note appended to her original account. The conversation I heard in the light was the conversation I had on that phone call, 14 months before it happened. I have no explanation. I am not certain I want one. Dr. Ostrowski has not returned to Devil's Gulch. She has declined all interview requests since 2012. Nirasta is Charles. The most disturbing account comes from 2014, when a long trail through hiker named Julian Moreau entered the Gulch during a late-season traverse. Moreau, an experienced backpacker who had completed multiple long-distance trails, documented his journey in a blog that attracted a modest following. His entry for September 23, 2014, describes encountering the held light at approximately 6:45 in the evening. Orange glow between the walls. Couldn't see a source. Thought it might be someone's headlamp reflecting off the rock, but there was no one else in the gulch. I walked toward it. Moreau entered the light. He heard his own voice, but the words he heard were not a conversation. They were a statement, a single sentence, repeated over and over. I'm not going to make it. Moreau exited the gulch and continued his hike. He completed the long trail without incident and returned home to New Hampshire in early October. He did not mention the experience to anyone except a close friend, who later shared the account with a researcher. On March 15, 2015, Julian Moreau was killed in a single-vehicle accident on a rural highway in Maine. He was traveling alone. There were no witnesses. The cause of the accident was never determined. His friend reported that Moreau had been troubled since his experience in the Gulch. He had difficulty sleeping. He checked his rearview mirror compulsively. He told his friend, in a conversation 2 weeks before his death, that he couldn't stop hearing the words. He said he heard them all the time, the friend recalled, not out loud, in his head, like they were waiting for him. He knew something was coming, he just didn't know when. The friend paused. He said the worst part wasn't knowing. The worst part was that he had already said it, in the Gulch. He had already spoken the last words he would ever say, and he had to live knowing what they were. Devil's Gulch remains part of the long trail, traversed by hundreds of hikers each year. The passage is unmarked except for the standard trail blazes. No signs warn of unusual phenomena. No guidebook mentions the held light. The gulch is narrow and cool even in summer. The rock walls are damp with moisture that seeps from some hidden source. The boulders are slick with moss. It is a place that feels older than the mountains around it, a wound that has never closed, a hollow that holds things it should not be able to hold. Light, perhaps. Sound, perhaps. Time, perhaps. The phenomenon has no explanation. It conforms to no known physics. It appears without warning and vanishes without trace. Those who experience it are left with words they cannot forget. Words they will speak days or months or years in the future, already heard, already memorized, already inevitable. Eleanor Swanson heard herself speak of a death before it happened. Samuel Ochterberg heard himself discuss his own diagnosis. Julian Moreau heard his own last words 6 months before he spoke them. The hollow holds what it holds. It does not explain, it does not comfort, it only waits, patient and orange and still, for the next traveler to pass through. And somewhere in the narrow dark between those ancient walls, suspended in light that does not flicker, conversations that have not yet occurred play on an endless loop, waiting to be lived, waiting to be spoken, waiting to become true. The video lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Now it shows only static. Maidstone Lake occupies a glacial basin in Vermont's northeast kingdom, approximately 8 miles south of the Canadian border. The lake covers nearly 800 acres, reaching depths of over 100 feet in its central basin. Maidstone State Park encompasses much of the eastern shoreline, offering primitive campsites accessible only by foot or canoe. The western shore is privately owned, largely undeveloped, and reachable only by unpaved logging roads that deteriorate into impassable ruts by midsummer. The area is among the most remote in Vermont. The town of Maidstone itself has no year-round population. The 2020 census recorded 0 permanent residents. The nearest services are in Bloomfield, 6 miles to the north, or Guildhall, 8 miles to the south. Cell phone coverage is non-existent. Radio signals are unreliable. Those who camp at Maidstone Lake do so with the understanding that they are, for all practical purposes, alone. This isolation has made the lake a destination for amateur astronomers since the 1970s. Light pollution is virtually absent. On clear nights, the Milky Way arches overhead in such detail that visitors have reported feeling vertigo, as if they might fall upward into the stars. It was this darkness that drew Nathan Reeves and Carla Dominguez to Maidstone Lake on the weekend of August 7, 2015. They could not have known that what they captured on video would cost them months of their lives and leave questions that have never been answered. Reeves and Dominguez were members of the Burlington Astronomical Society, a loose organization of amateur stargazers who coordinated observation trips throughout northern New England. Both were experienced night sky photographers. Reeves, a software engineer, had built custom tracking mounts for his telescopes. Dominguez, a high school science teacher, specialized in long-exposure imaging of deep sky objects. They arrived at Maidstone State Park on Friday, August 7th, and paddled to a campsite on the lake's southeastern shore. The weather forecast predicted clear skies through Sunday. They planned to photograph the Perseid meteor shower, which was approaching its peak. On Saturday evening, they set up their equipment on a granite outcropping that extended into the lake, providing an unobstructed view of the northern sky. Reeves positioned his primary telescope toward the constellation Perseus. Dominguez mounted a wide-angle camera on a separate tripod to capture the broader meteor activity. At approximately 11:43 in the evening, Dominguez noticed a light descending from the northwest. She initially assumed it was a satellite or high-altitude aircraft, but its movement was wrong. It was descending too steeply, too slowly, and without the blinking navigation lights required of commercial aircraft. She redirected her camera toward the object and began recording. The footage, which both astronomers reviewed repeatedly before its corruption, showed a white light approximately the size of a full moon at arm's length, descending at a steady rate toward the lake's surface. The light cast a distinct reflection on the water. It made no sound. At 11:46, the light stopped. It hovered approximately 3 feet above the lake, motionless, for 1 minute and 47 seconds. Then it vanished. Not faded, not departed. Vanished. Instantaneously, completely, leaving no afterimage, no residual glow, no disturbance on the water. Reeves and Dominguez remained at their campsite for another hour, scanning the sky for any recurrence. None came. They reviewed the footage on Dominguez's camera screen, confirming that the event had been captured clearly. The file was 4 minutes and 17 seconds long, time-stamped and geotagged with the coordinates of their position. They returned to Burlington on Sunday afternoon, shaken but convinced they had documented something significant. On Monday, August 10th, Reeves contacted the Federal Aviation Administration to inquire about aircraft activity over Maidstone Lake on the night in question. He provided the time, location, and a description of what he and Dominguez had observed. The FAA responded within 24 hours, stating that no flight plans had been filed for the area during the specified window, and no aircraft were tracked over Maidstone Lake between 10 in the evening and 2 in the morning. Reeves then contacted the National Weather Service to rule out meteorological phenomena, ball lightning, atmospheric inversions, or other known optical effects. A meteorologist reviewed the data and confirmed that conditions on the night of August 8th were stable, with no unusual atmospheric activity recorded. On Wednesday, August 12th, Reeves filed an informal report with the Vermont State Police, describing the sighting and noting his concerns about unidentified aircraft in a remote area near the Canadian border. He included his contact information and offered to share the video footage. He received no response. On Friday, August 14th, 2 men arrived at Reeves's apartment in Burlington. They did not provide identification. They did not provide business cards. They introduced themselves only as consultants working with federal agencies on aerial phenomena, and asked to speak with Reeves about his report. Reeves invited them inside. Dominguez, who had been visiting to review additional footage, was also present. The conversation, as both astronomers later described it, was polite, but insistent. The consultants asked detailed questions about the sighting, the exact time, the exact location, the behavior of the light, the duration of the hovering phase. They asked about the video footage, how it had been recorded, where it was stored, who had viewed it. Then they produced a document. The document was a non-disclosure agreement. It prohibited Reeves and Dominguez from discussing the sighting publicly, sharing the footage with media or researchers, or filing additional reports with government agencies. In exchange, the document offered nothing: no compensation, no explanation, no acknowledgement that anything unusual had occurred. Reeves asked who the consultants represented. They declined to answer. Dominguez asked why a non-disclosure agreement was necessary if the sighting was merely a misidentified aircraft or natural phenomenon. The consultants exchanged a glance but did not respond. Both astronomers refused to sign. The consultants left without argument. They provided no contact information. They have never been identified. Within 6 days, the video footage was gone. Dominguez discovered the corruption on Thursday, August 20th, when she attempted to transfer the file to a secure backup drive. The original file on her camera's memory card displayed only static 4 minutes and 17 seconds of gray noise. The timestamp and geotag data remained intact, but the visual content had been replaced entirely. She checked her laptop, where she had saved a copy on August 9th. That file was also corrupted. Reeves had uploaded a compressed version to a private cloud storage account. When he attempted to download it, the file was missing. His account activity log showed no deletion. The file had simply ceased to exist. A forensic analysis conducted by a colleague in Reeves's software company found no evidence of external intrusion. The corruption appeared to have occurred simultaneously across all storage locations, affecting only the video file and leaving all other data intact. It's not impossible, the colleague told Reeves, but it's not probable either. For this to happen by accident, you'd need a coincidence that strains credibility. For it to happen deliberately, you'd need access I can't explain. Reeves filed a follow-up report with the Vermont State Police, describing the visit from the consultants and the subsequent corruption of the footage. The report was acknowledged. No investigation was opened. He contacted the FAA again, asking for clarification on who might have jurisdiction over unidentified aerial phenomena in Vermont. He received a form letter directing him to file a report with the National UFO Reporting Center, a private organization with no official government affiliation. He contacted his congressional representative's office, requesting assistance in identifying the consultants who had visited his home. A staffer promised to look into the matter. No response ever came. In the years since the incident, Reeves and Dominguez have spoken publicly about their experience exactly once, in a 2018 interview with a podcast dedicated to unexplained phenomena. The interview was conducted anonymously, with their voices altered and their names withheld. They agreed to participate only after the podcast host signed a legal agreement prohibiting any attempt to identify them. The interview provides the most complete account of the sighting and its aftermath. Both astronomers describe the light in consistent detail. Both describe the consultants in identical terms. Two men in their 40s, wearing dark suits, carrying no visible identification, driving a black sedan with no visible license plates. They knew things they shouldn't have known, Dominguez said in the interview. They knew the exact coordinates of our campsite. We hadn't included that in any of our reports. We hadn't told anyone where we were camping, but they knew. Reeves added, "They asked about the hovering duration, 1 minute and 47 seconds. We hadn't reported that number. We'd said approximately 2 minutes. But they knew the exact time. They had either seen the footage themselves or they had their own record of the event." The podcast host asked if they believed the consultants were responsible for corrupting the video. "I don't know," Reeves said. "I can't prove anything. But I know that we had footage of something real, something documented, something that could have been analyzed, and now it's gone. All of it, like it never happened." Dominguez was more direct. "They didn't want us to have proof," she said. "They didn't care if we believed what we saw. They just didn't want us to be able to show anyone else." And they succeeded. Maidstone Lake remains one of Vermont's most isolated destinations. The state park continues to offer primitive campsites. Amateur astronomers still visit during meteor showers and lunar eclipses, drawn by the profound darkness and the unobstructed sky. No official record acknowledges the sighting of August 8, 2015. The FAA has no file on the incident. The Vermont State Police have no open investigation. The National UFO Reporting Center database contains no entry matching the date, time, and location. The coordinates where Reeves and Dominguez camped, the coordinates embedded in a video file that no longer exists, were never filed with any agency. They exist only in the memories of two people who watched a light descend from the sky and hover above the water, silent and white and unexplained. And somewhere, perhaps, in a file that bears no official stamp, the footage still exists. 4 minutes and 17 seconds of something that was not supposed to be seen. Something that descended to 3 feet above a lake in the most remote corner of Vermont and then vanished, leaving behind only questions and static, and the memory of two men in dark suits who knew more than they should have known. The consultants never returned. They never made contact again. They never explained who they were or what they wanted. But they got what they came for. The proof is gone. Only the coordinates remain, and no one filed them. The house speaks in light. It speaks in names, and the names always belong to the dying. Peacham is one of Vermont's oldest hill towns, settled in 1776 and largely unchanged in character since the early 19th century. Its population has never exceeded 700. Its village center, a white church, a general store, a library housed in a former schoolhouse, appears in nearly every collection of Vermont photography, a postcard image of rural New England preserved in amber. But Peacham extends well beyond its village center into hollows and ridges where the roads narrow and the houses grow sparse. Peacham Hollow lies 3 miles northeast of the village, accessible by a series of unpaved roads that climb into the hills, separating Peacham from the neighboring town of Danville. The hollow contains perhaps a dozen structures, farmhouses, barns, sugar shacks, most dating to the mid-1800s. One farmhouse stands apart from the others. It sits at the end of a private road screened from view by a stand of old-growth maple. The road has no name on any map. The mailbox at its entrance has no number. The property records at the Peacham Town Clerk's office identify the parcel only by its surveyor's coordinates. The house was built in 1843 by a farmer named Josiah Whitmore. It passed through 3 generations of Whitmores before being sold in 1921 to a family from Massachusetts. Since then, it has changed hands 11 times. No owner has remained longer than 3 years. Most leave within 18 months. None has ever explained why. The town does not discuss the property. Realtors do not list it. When it sells quietly through private transactions that leave minimal paper trails. But the stories persist. Stories about light, stories about names, stories about what the house knows before anyone should know it. Los Mikifuscha. The first documented account of the phenomenon dates to December of 1968, recorded in a letter written by a woman named Genevieve Ashford to her sister in Connecticut. Ashford and her husband Warren had purchased the Peacham Hollow property in the spring of that year, intending to restore it as a weekend retreat. The house had been vacant for nearly 4 years, and the previous owners, a couple from New York, had abandoned it mid-renovation, leaving tools and materials scattered throughout the structure. The Ashfords spent the summer and fall making repairs. By December, the house was habitable, and they planned to spend the holiday there. On the night of December 14th, Genevieve Ashford observed something that would drive them from the property within 6 weeks. "I woke at approximately 2 in the morning," she wrote. "Warren was asleep beside me. The bedroom was dark, but I could see a flickering light through the window, rapid, irregular, like a strobe. I assumed it was a car on the road, headlights flashing through the trees. But it continued for several minutes, and the pattern seemed deliberate." Ashford rose and went to the window. The light was coming from the barn, approximately 50 yards from the house. The barn had no electricity. It had been sealed since their arrival. "The light was white and very bright," she continued. "It flashed in sequences, short bursts, longer bursts, pauses. I counted the pattern several times. It repeated exactly." Genevieve Ashford had learned Morse code during the war, working as a civilian volunteer for the civil defense. She recognized the pattern immediately. The flashes spelled a name, Robert space Hall. She did not know anyone named Robert Hall, neither did her husband. They assumed it was a prank. Teenagers from the village, perhaps, or hunters using the abandoned barn as a shelter. The next morning they searched the barn. They found no evidence of entry, no footprints in the snow, no equipment that could have produced the light. 3 weeks later, on January 4, 1969, Warren Ashford's cousin, Robert Hall, died of a heart attack in Providence, Rhode Island. He was 51 years old. Warren had not spoken to him in over a decade. The Ashfords sold the property in February of 1969. Genevieve's letter, discovered among her sister's papers after her death in 2003, provides no further details. The second documented witness was a carpenter named Douglas Ferreira, who rented the property from its then owner in the summer of 1984. Ferreira was renovating a home in Danville and needed temporary housing close to the job site. The Peacham Hollow farmhouse was available at an unusually low rent. Ferreira lived in the house for 7 months. During that time, he observed the light phenomenon on 3 separate occasions. His account, provided in a 1992 interview with a researcher studying Vermont folklore, describes the first sighting. "It was August, maybe 2 in the morning, hot night, windows open. I saw this flickering from outside. Thought it was lightning at first, but there was no thunder, no clouds. I went out on the porch and saw it was coming from the upstairs window, the room I used for storage. No lights in there, no electricity run to that part of the house." Ferreira watched the flickering for approximately 4 minutes. He did not know Morse code, but he noted that the pattern repeated 3 times before stopping. "I went upstairs to check. Nothing. Room was empty, dark, same as I'd left it. Window was closed. No explanation." He observed the phenomenon again in October and November. After the third occurrence, he borrowed a book on Morse code from the Peacham Library and waited. On December 2, 1984, the light appeared again. Ferreira transcribed the pattern by hand. It spelled Margaret space Ferreira, his mother's name. Margaret Ferreira died on December 19, 1984, of complications from pneumonia. She was 78 years old and had been in declining health, but her death was not expected. Ferreira moved out of the farmhouse on December 21st. He broke his lease and forfeited his deposit. He never returned. "I don't know what that house is," he told the researcher. "I don't know how it knew my mother's name. I don't know how it knew she was going to die, but it knew, and it told me, and I couldn't do anything about it." The third documented witness is the most recent and the most reluctant to speak. In 2011, a writer named Priya Chakraborty purchased the Peacham Hollow property as a retreat for completing a novel. She was aware of its reputation, the frequent turnovers, the local reluctance to discuss it, but dismissed the stories as rural superstition. The house was structurally sound, affordably priced, and offered the isolation she needed. She lived there for 26 months. Chakraborty's account was provided in a 2019 interview, conducted only after extensive negotiation and with the understanding that certain details would remain confidential. She has since declined all further requests for comment. "I saw the light 4 times, she said, always between 1 and 3 in the morning, always from the same window, a small window in the attic that I'd nailed shut because the frame was warped. The light was white, very fast, like someone blinking a flashlight on and off." Chakraborty did not know Morse code. After the second occurrence, she downloaded an app that could translate audio recordings of Morse patterns. After the third occurrence, she recorded the flashing on her phone and ran it through the translator. The result was a name, James space Chakraborty, her father. "I called him the next morning," she said. "He was fine, healthy, active, no concerns. I convinced myself the app had made an error, that I'd recorded the pattern wrong, that the whole thing was a coincidence or a malfunction." James Chakraborty died 23 days later, on March 15, 2013. He suffered a stroke while driving and crashed his car into a guardrail on Interstate 91. He was 64 years old. Chakraborty did not immediately connect the events. The grief was too overwhelming, the circumstances too sudden. It was only months later, reviewing the files on her phone, that she found the recording. "I listened to it again," she said. "I ran it through 3 different translators. They all said the same thing, his name, spelled out exactly. 3 weeks before he died," she paused. "I sold the house in 2014. I didn't tell the buyers what I'd seen. I didn't know how. I just wanted it gone." The house sold again in 2016 and again in 2019. The current owners, if any, have not been identified. Attempts to investigate the property have been consistently unsuccessful. In 1997, a paranormal research group from Boston requested permission to conduct an overnight observation. The owner at the time, a retired accountant who had purchased the house as an investment property, initially agreed, then withdrew consent without explanation. He sold the property 4 months later. In 2008, a journalist from a Burlington alternative newspaper attempted to research the property's history for a feature on Vermont ghost stories. The town clerk in Peacham provided basic deed information but declined to discuss the property further. Neighbors contacted by the journalist either refused to comment or claimed no knowledge of any unusual occurrences. "People know," Douglas Ferreira said in his 1992 interview. "The people who've lived there know, but nobody wants to talk about it. Because talking about it means admitting it's real. And if it's real, then what does that mean? That a house can know who's going to die? That it can spell out their names before they're gone?" He shook his head. "Some things are easier to forget." The farmhouse still stands at the end of its unnamed road, screened by maples that have grown taller with each passing decade. The barn where Genevieve Ashford saw the first flashes has partially collapsed, its roof caved in by decades of snow. The attic window where Priya Chakraborty recorded her father's name remains dark. No light has been reported since 2013. Perhaps the house has gone silent. Perhaps there is simply no one there to see. But the pattern persists in the records. 11 owners in 56 years, each departure unexplained, each sale conducted quietly, each new buyer unaware of what came before. 3 witnesses, 3 names, 3 deaths. Robert Hall, Margaret Ferreira, James Chakraborty. The names were spelled in light in a language invented for urgent communication across vast distances. Morse code was designed to convey critical information when no other method would suffice. The house in Peacham Hollow has found its own use for that language. It speaks in flashes. It speaks in names. And the names are always accurate. The names are always early. And the names are always of people who do not yet know they are already gone. They move in single file. They never stop. They never look back. Newark Pond lies in the northeast corner of Vermont, straddling the boundary between the towns of Newark and Brighton in Essex County. The pond covers approximately 200 acres, fed by streams draining the surrounding hills and emptying into the Clyde River to the north. Its shoreline is largely undeveloped, a few seasonal camps, a boat launch maintained by the state, and miles of forest that have never been cleared. The pond freezes early and thaws late. By mid-December, the ice is typically thick enough to support foot traffic. By January, it can bear the weight of vehicles. Ice fishermen have worked Newark Pond for generations, drilling holes through ice that sometimes exceeds 2 feet in thickness. They know the pond's depths, its currents, its peculiarities. They also know its stories. The earliest recorded mention of unusual lights on Newark Pond appears in an 1893 edition of the Caledonian Record, in a brief item attributed to a correspondent in the town of Newark. The item describes a procession of ghostly illuminations observed crossing the frozen pond on a foggy morning in January of that year. The correspondent counted 7 lights moving in solemn order from the northern shore toward the southern. The lights, he wrote, cast no shadow upon the ice and made no sound in their passage. The item concludes with a single sentence. Old residents of the town claim to have seen the procession before, always in winter, always in fog, and always numbering 7. No follow-up was published. The correspondent was never identified. But the procession continued. Wir Speedkleist der Wurst. The most detailed early account comes from a diary kept by a schoolteacher named Ingrid Halverson, who lived in Newark from 1909 to 1937. Halverson's diary, donated to the Vermont Historical Society by her great-niece in 2001, contains 3 separate entries describing the phenomenon. The first, dated January 19, 1914, reads, "Walked to the pond this morning before dawn to watch the sunrise. Heavy fog, visibility poor. At approximately 6:15, I observed a series of lights moving across the ice from the direction of the outlet stream. I counted 7. They moved in single file, evenly spaced, traveling south at a walking pace. The lights were pale blue, approximately the size of a lantern flame, but they flickered not at all. They cast no reflection on the ice. They made no sound. I watched until they reached the southern shore and vanished into the trees. The entire passage took perhaps 4 minutes." Halverson observed the procession again in January of 1921 and February of 1929. Her descriptions are nearly identical. 7 lights, pale blue, single file, north to south, no reflection, no sound. Her final entry on the subject from 1929 includes an additional detail. I attempted to approach the lights this morning. I walked onto the ice and moved toward them as they passed. When I came within approximately 30 feet, the nearest light, the one at the rear of the procession, seemed to pause. It did not turn. It did not acknowledge me. But it waited. The other 6 continued southward. After perhaps 10 seconds, the rear light resumed its movement and rejoined the others. I did not attempt to follow. Halverson never recorded the phenomenon again. She died in 1942, having lived her final years in a nursing home in St. Johnsbury. Her diary makes no further mention of Newark Pond. Between 1940 and 2010, the procession was observed at least 14 additional times, according to accounts collected by local historians and folklorists. The witnesses include ice fishermen, hunters, loggers, and residents of the seasonal camps that dot the pond's shoreline. Their descriptions are remarkably consistent. 7 lights, pale blue, single file, north to south, no reflection, no sound. A logger named Fernand Bouchard observed the procession in January of 1963. He was cutting timber on the eastern shore when the fog rolled in, reducing visibility to less than 50 feet. Through the fog, he saw the lights moving across the ice. "I thought it was people with lanterns," he said in a 1985 interview. "Maybe ice fishermen heading to their shacks. But the lights were too steady. Lanterns flicker. These didn't. And they were too blue, not yellow, like fire. Blue like, I don't know, like moonlight maybe. But there was no moon." Bouchard watched the procession until it disappeared into the fog. He estimated the passage took 3 to 4 minutes. "I walked out there afterward," he said, "to see if there were tracks, footprints, ski marks, anything. The ice was clean, smooth. Nothing had walked on it, nothing I could see." A similar account was provided by a retired nurse named Dorothy Olson, who observed the procession from her camp on the western shore in February of 1991. "I was up early, couldn't sleep," she said. "The fog was thick. I could barely see the water from my porch. Then I saw them. 7 lights moving together like a funeral procession. They moved so slowly, so deliberately, like they were carrying something." Olson paused. "I know how that sounds, but that's what it looked like, a procession, a ceremony, something sacred." She never saw them again. She sold the camp in 1994. The 2019 footage represents the only known video documentation of the phenomenon. On the morning of January 12, 2019, a drone operator named Marcus Lindgren was conducting aerial surveys of Newark Pond for a real estate company considering development along the southern shore. Lindgren arrived before dawn to capture footage of the sunrise over the frozen landscape. The fog was heavy, limiting visibility, but he launched his drone regardless, hoping to capture atmospheric images from above the fog layer. At approximately 6:22 in the morning, Lindgren's drone camera recorded something unexpected. 7 pale blue lights, moving in single file across the ice, from north to south. Lindgren observed the footage in real time on his controller's screen. He redirected the drone to follow the procession, descending to approximately 40 feet above the ice. The footage, which he later uploaded to YouTube, shows the lights clearly, pale blue, evenly spaced, moving at a steady walking pace. They cast no reflection on the ice below them. Lindgren had equipped his drone with a thermal imaging attachment for surveying purposes. He activated it while following the procession. The thermal camera showed nothing. The ice appeared as a uniform, cold surface. The lights, visible on the standard camera, did not register on the thermal imaging. They produced no heat signature whatsoever. "That's not possible," Lindgren said in a 2020 interview with a Paranormal Investigation podcast. "Anything that emits visible light produces some amount of heat. Even LEDs, even the coldest light sources, they show up on thermal. These didn't. They were there, I could see them, but according to the thermal camera, they didn't exist." The procession reached the southern shore and vanished into the tree line. The entire passage, as recorded by the drone, lasted 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Lindgren uploaded the footage to YouTube on January 14, 2019. He titled it, "Strange Lights on Newark Pond, Vermont, Unexplained." The video received approximately 12,000 views in its first 48 hours. On January 16th, the video was removed. Lindgren received no warning before the removal. He discovered it only when a friend attempted to share the link and found it inactive. When he checked his YouTube Studio dashboard, the video was listed as removed for community guideline violations. No specific violation was cited. He appealed the removal. The appeal was denied within 24 hours. The denial message stated that the video violated YouTube's policies on misleading content, but provided no further explanation. "I didn't alter the footage," Lindgren said. "I didn't add effects or manipulate the images. It was raw drone footage. I've uploaded dozens of similar videos without any issues. This was the only one that was removed." He attempted to re-upload the footage under a different title. That video was removed within 6 hours. He uploaded it to Vimeo. It was removed within 12 hours, again for unspecified policy violations. He posted still frames from the footage to Reddit, Facebook, and Twitter. The posts remained active for varying periods, some for hours, some for days, before being removed or rendered invisible through algorithmic suppression. "I still have the original files," Lindgren said, "on a hard drive that's not connected to the internet. I've shown them to friends, to researchers. The footage is real, but every time I try to share it publicly, it disappears." He has not attempted to upload the footage since 2020. Dunbasseisgefies of Newark Pond remains a quiet destination for ice fishermen and snowmobilers. The development project that prompted Lindgren's survey was never completed. The real estate company withdrew its interest in the spring of 2019, citing unforeseen complications without elaboration. The pond freezes each winter, as it always has. The fog rolls in on cold mornings, reducing visibility to a few dozen feet. The ice creaks and groans as temperatures fluctuate, sounds that carry across the water like distant voices. And on certain mornings when the fog is thick and the light is gray and the world seems suspended between night and day, 7 pale blue lights appear on the northern shore. They move in single file. They move at a walking pace. They move from north to south, as they have moved for over a century, perhaps longer. They cast no reflection on the ice. They produce no heat. They make no sound. They have never deviated from their path. They have never stopped. They have never acknowledged the watchers on the shore, or the drones in the sky, or the cameras that try to capture what they are. They are a procession, a ceremony, a passage, 7 lights moving together, carrying something invisible toward a destination no one has ever identified. Ingrid Halverson saw them pause once when she approached. The rear light waited for her. Then it moved on. Perhaps it was an invitation. Perhaps it was a warning. Or perhaps it was simply an acknowledgement, a recognition that she had seen them, that she was watching, that she was one of the few who would ever witness what happens on Newark Pond when the fog rolls in and the world goes quiet. The procession continues. It has always continued. And somewhere on the ice, in the fog, in the space between north and south, 7 lights are moving still, single file, always 7, always watching, never looking back. The forest remembers something the maps have chosen to forget. Groton State Forest encompasses nearly 26,000 acres in central Vermont, a patchwork of boreal wetlands, hardwood ridges, and glacial ponds that stretches across portions of 5 towns. It is the second largest contiguous landholding in the state, traversed by over 30 miles of hiking trails and dotted with campgrounds that fill each summer with families seeking refuge from the populated corridors to the south and west. The forest was assembled piecemeal over the 20th century, purchased from timber companies and private landowners by the state of Vermont, beginning in 1919. Much of the land had been logged repeatedly since the 1800s, leaving few trees older than a century. But pockets of older growth remain, sections that were too steep, too wet, or too remote to harvest profitably. These pockets are not marked on any official map. One such pocket lies approximately 2 miles northeast of Ricker Pond, accessible only by an unmaintained trail that branches from the Coldwater Brook path and climbs into a shallow depression between two unnamed ridges. The depression covers roughly half an acre. The trees here, red spruce, balsam fir, and scattered yellow birch, are older than those surrounding them. The understory is sparse, the ground carpeted with moss that deadens footfall. Rangers have known about this place for decades. They do not include it in trail guides. They do not lead visitors there. When asked directly, most claim no knowledge of its existence. But the incident reports tell a different story, and the incident reports describe something that should not exist. The first documented anomaly occurred in August of 1983 when a seasonal ranger named Thomas Whitfield was conducting a routine survey of the Coldwater Brook watershed. Whitfield carried a handheld radio for communication with the ranger station at Ricker Pond. His survey route took him past the unmaintained trail, and on a whim, he decided to follow it. His incident report, filed the following day, describes what happened. At approximately 1400 hours, I entered a small clearing approximately 2 miles northeast of Ricker Pond. The clearing was unremarkable, old growth, heavy moss cover, no signs of recent human activity. I attempted to radio the station to report my position. The radio emitted a loud static burst and then went silent. I could not raise the station on any channel. Whitfield remained in the clearing for approximately 15 minutes, troubleshooting his radio. During this time, he noticed several additional anomalies. My wristwatch, a digital model, began displaying incorrect time, jumping forward by several hours, then backward, then displaying symbols that did not correspond to any normal function. The compass I carried for navigation spun continuously, unable to find north. I experienced a sensation of profound sadness that I could not attribute to any cause. Whitfield departed the clearing and hiked back toward Ricker Pond. As he left, his radio resumed normal function. His watch reset itself. His compass stabilized. He did not return to the clearing. His incident report was filed, acknowledged, and placed in a folder that would not be opened again for nearly 2 decades. The second documented incident occurred in June of 1997 when a pair of wildlife biologists from the University of Vermont were conducting a bat survey in Groton State Forest. Dr. Elena Vasquez and her graduate assistant, Michael Thornton, were using ultrasonic recording equipment to capture bat echolocation calls in various habitats throughout the forest. Their survey route included the area northeast of Ricker Pond. They entered the depression between the ridges at approximately 9:30 in the evening, shortly after sunset. Dr. Vasquez's field notes, obtained through a public records request in 2016, describe what their equipment recorded. Upon entering the survey area, our ultrasonic detector registered a continuous tone at 17 Hz, well below the range of bat echolocation calls and below the threshold of human hearing. The tone was steady, unvarying, and present only within the boundaries of the clearing. When we stepped outside the clearing, the tone ceased. When we re-entered, it resumed. 17 Hz is at the lower edge of the infrasound spectrum. It cannot be heard by human ears under normal circumstances, but it can be felt as pressure, as unease, as a sense that something is wrong without any identifiable cause. Both Michael and I experienced significant emotional disturbance while in the clearing, Dr. Vasquez continued. I would describe it as grief, a profound, sourceless sadness that intensified the longer we remained. Michael reported the same sensation independently. We had not discussed our emotional states prior to comparing notes. Their ultrasonic recording equipment captured the 17 Hz tone clearly. When analyzed at the university's acoustics laboratory, the tone was found to be perfectly consistent, no variation in frequency, amplitude, or duration for the entire 18 minutes they spent in the clearing. Natural infrasound sources, wind, seismic activity, animal vocalizations, do not produce tones of this consistency, Dr. Vasquez noted. The source of the sound remains unidentified. She recommended further investigation. No follow-up study was ever conducted. The visual anomalies were first documented in 2004 when a nature photographer named Rebecca Stahl visited Groton State Forest to capture images of fall foliage. Stahl had hiked extensively throughout the forest over the previous decade and prided herself on exploring areas beyond the established trails. She discovered the clearing by accident, following a game trail that intersected with the unmaintained path. She spent approximately 45 minutes photographing the old-growth trees and the moss-covered forest floor. When she reviewed her images that evening, she found something unexpected. Approximately one-third of my photographs contained a violet coloration that was not visible when I took the pictures, she wrote in a post on a photography forum in 2005. The violet appeared as a diffuse glow concentrated in the center of the frame, regardless of where I pointed the camera. It was present in images taken facing north, south, east, and west. It was not present in any images taken outside the clearing. Stahl posted several of the photographs to the forum. Other photographers suggested explanations: lens flare, sensor malfunction, light leakage through the camera body. Stahl tested each hypothesis and found none satisfactory. "I've used this camera for 3 years," she wrote. "I've taken thousands of images in every lighting condition imaginable. This has never happened before or since. Only in that clearing. Only that day." She returned to the clearing in October of 2004 with a different camera, a film model with no electronic components. The resulting photographs showed the same violet glow. "I can't explain it," she concluded. "The cameras are capturing something my eyes can't see, something that exists in that place and nowhere else." Stahl stopped posting to the forum shortly afterward. She has not responded to inquiries about her experience since 2006. The most disturbing accounts concern what some visitors have seen at the edge of their vision. In 2011, a hiker named David Okonkwo submitted a detailed report to the Groton State Forest Ranger Station describing an experience in the clearing. Okonkwo was an experienced backcountry traveler who had completed multiple long-distance trails. He was not, by his own description, prone to imagination or superstition. His report describes entering the clearing at approximately 3 in the afternoon on a clear September day. "I felt the sadness immediately," he wrote. "It was like walking into a wall of grief. I stopped and looked around trying to identify the source, but there was nothing unusual, just trees, moss, the same forest I'd been walking through all day." Okonkwo remained in the clearing for several minutes, attempting to shake the feeling. As he prepared to leave, he noticed something in his peripheral vision. There was a light to my left, not bright, soft, like dawn. I turned to look at it directly, and it wasn't there. I turned back, and it reappeared at the edge of my vision. It had a shape. It looked like a door. He described the phenomenon as a vertical rectangle of pale light, approximately 7 feet tall and 3 feet wide, standing among the trees. It was visible only in his peripheral vision. When he looked directly at its location, he saw only forest. I tried to approach it. Every time I moved toward where I thought it was, it shifted. It stayed at the edge of my vision, always the same distance away, always to my left, always shaped like a door. Okonkwo eventually left the clearing. The door-shaped light did not follow him. He reported the experience to the ranger station the following day. A ranger named Carol Sundberg took his report. According to Okonkwo, she listened without surprise. "She told me I wasn't the first person to see it," he wrote. "She said others had reported the same thing, a door made of light that you could only see from the corner of your eye. She said no one knew what it was, and then she asked me not to tell anyone else about it." Okonkwo asked why. She said, "Because some people go looking for it, and some of them find it." She did not elaborate. Ranger Carol Sundberg retired from Groton State Forest in 2014. She has declined all requests for interviews regarding the clearing or the phenomena associated with it. Current rangers, when asked about the area northeast of Ricker Pond, uniformly deny any knowledge of unusual occurrences. The unmaintained trail is not shown on official maps. The clearing is not identified in any public document, but the incident reports continue to accumulate. A 2017 report describes a GPS unit that displayed coordinates placing its user in northern Canada while standing in the clearing. A 2019 report describes a wildlife camera that captured 17 hours of footage showing only violet static. A 2021 report describes a hiker who entered the clearing and emerged convinced that 2 hours had passed, though her companions insisted she had been gone for less than 10 minutes. The 17 Hertz tone has been recorded by at least 4 additional researchers. The violet light has appeared in photographs taken by at least 7 visitors. The door at the edge of vision has been reported by at least 3 others, and the grief, the profound sourceless sadness that every visitor describes, remains unexplained. Oh, the clearing has no name. It appears on no map. The trails that lead to it are unmarked and unmaintained, but it exists. 2 miles northeast of Ricker Pond, in a shallow depression between 2 ridges where the trees are older than they should be and the moss grows thick and silent. The forest there is quiet in a way that other forests are not. The air is heavy, the light is strange, and something hums at 17 hertz, just below the threshold of hearing, filling the space with a frequency that the human ear cannot detect, but the human heart somehow understands. Those who enter feel grief. Those who photograph see violet. Those who linger see a door that exists only when they are not looking. No one knows what the clearing is. No one knows why it exists. No one knows what waits behind the door that no one can see directly. But the rangers know it is there, and they know enough not to go looking. Some doors are not meant to be opened. Some doors are not meant to be found. And some doors, perhaps, have already opened, long ago in a place the forest remembers and the maps have chosen to forget. The static field of Groton holds its secrets. It hums, it glows, it grieves. And somewhere at the edge of vision, a door made of light stands waiting, patient, permanent, watching. The lake showed a sky that did not exist. Caspian Lake lies in the heart of Vermont's northeast kingdom, a glacial body of water covering nearly 800 acres in the town of Greensboro. The lake is deep, over 100 feet in its central basin, and remarkably clear, fed by underground springs that maintain visibility to depths of 20 feet or more. Its shores are dotted with summer cottages, most dating to the early 20th century, when Greensboro became a quiet retreat for academics, writers, and artists seeking refuge from the cities of the eastern seaboard. The town has produced a disproportionate number of notable residents: Supreme Court justices, Pulitzer Prize winners, university presidents. It has also cultivated a culture of discretion. Those who summer in Greensboro do not seek attention. They do not speak publicly about their neighbors or their experiences. They protect the town's privacy as carefully as their own. This culture of discretion may explain why the photograph taken on the night of September 14, 1986, remained unknown outside Greensboro for nearly 3 decades. It may also explain why, when the photograph finally became known, so many people worked so hard to ensure it would never be seen again. The photographer was a retired professor of comparative literature named Wallace Fairbanks. Fairbanks had summered in Greensboro since 1952 and maintained a cottage on the western shore of Caspian Lake. He was an amateur astronomer and kept detailed records of celestial events visible from his property. On the evening of September 14, 1986, Fairbanks set up his camera on the dock to photograph a predicted meteor shower. The sky was unusually clear, with no moon and excellent visibility. He exposed several frames over the course of 2 hours, capturing the stars and occasional meteor streaks. At approximately 11:45 in the evening, Fairbanks noticed something unusual in the lake. His personal journal, excerpts of which were shared with a researcher in 2014, describes the moment. The water had been calm all evening, reflecting the stars clearly. At approximately 1:15 to midnight, I observed a luminescence in the lake's surface that did not correspond to anything in the sky above. The luminescence was green and violet, shifting and undulating in patterns characteristic of the aurora borealis. I looked up immediately. The sky was clear. There was no aurora visible. Fairbanks watched the phenomenon for approximately 3 minutes. The colors moved across the surface of the lake exactly as the northern lights would move across the sky, curtains of green and violet rippling and flowing from north to south. But the sky remained dark and unchanging. The reflection had no source, Fairbanks wrote. The lake was showing me something that was not there. He photographed the phenomenon using his remaining film. He exposed 4 frames before the colors faded and the lake returned to its normal reflection of stars. When he developed the film the following week, 3 of the 4 frames showed the aurora reflection clearly. The colors were vivid, the patterns distinct, the lake surface smooth and mirror-like. The sky above, visible in the upper portion of each frame, showed only stars. Fairbanks shared the photographs with several neighbors and colleagues. He also contacted the National Weather Service to inquire about aurora activity on the night in question. The response was unambiguous. There had been no aurora borealis visible anywhere in New England on September 14, 1986. Solar activity had been minimal. Geomagnetic conditions were stable. The northern lights had not been present. Which Fairbanks was a methodical man, trained in textual analysis and accustomed to scrutinizing evidence. He was not satisfied with the Weather Service's response. Over the following months, he contacted additional authorities. The Space Environment Services Center, then operated by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, confirmed that no geomagnetic storm had occurred on the date in question. Their records showed no solar flare activity, no coronal mass ejection, no conditions that would produce visible aurora at Vermont's latitude. The Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, which maintained a network of aurora observation stations, reported no sightings anywhere in the continental United States on that date. The Vermont Geological Survey, which Fairbanks contacted on the theory that some geological phenomenon might produce aurora-like lights, declined to comment. A brief letter dated November 3, 1986, stated only that the phenomenon you describe falls outside the scope of our research mandate, and suggested he contact the university system. He contacted the physics department at the University of Vermont. A professor agreed to examine the photographs and met with Fairbanks in December of 1986. The meeting lasted approximately 2 hours. No written record of the meeting exists, but Fairbanks's journal contains a single entry dated that evening. Professor Lindstrom examined the photographs at length. He confirmed that they appear to show a genuine aurora reflection. He could offer no explanation for how this was possible. When I asked if he would be willing to investigate further, he declined. He said that some phenomena are better left undocumented. He would not explain what he meant. Fairbanks made no further inquiries. He stored the photographs in a safe deposit box at a bank in Hardwick and did not display or discuss them publicly for the remainder of his life. He died in 2003 at the age of 91. The photographs resurfaced in 2011 when Fairbanks's estate was settled by his nephew, a lawyer based in Boston named Gregory Fairbanks Wright. Among the documents and possessions in his uncle's safe deposit box, Gregory found an envelope containing 3 photographs and a handwritten note. The note read, "Caspian Lake, September 14, 1986. Aurora reflection without aurora. No explanation found. Not to be published." Gregory Fairbanks Wright was initially skeptical. He assumed the photographs had been manipulated or that his uncle had been mistaken about the conditions that night. He consulted with a professional photo analyst who examined the negatives, which were also in the envelope, and confirmed that they showed no evidence of double exposure, manipulation, or tampering. "The images are genuine," the analyst's report concluded. "They depict a reflection of aurora-like light on a body of water, with a clear sky visible above. I cannot explain how this effect was achieved naturally." Gregory also contacted the National Weather Service, as his uncle had done 25 years earlier. He received the same response. No aurora activity had been recorded on September 14, 1986. He began reaching out to researchers who specialized in unusual atmospheric phenomena. Most did not respond. Those who did expressed interest, but were unable to offer explanations. One response stood out. In March of 2012, Gregory received a letter from an atmospheric scientist at a federal research laboratory. The scientist, who requested anonymity, had seen one of Gregory's inquiries on an academic mailing list. The letter was brief. "I have examined the photographs you described and find them deeply troubling. The phenomenon they depict is not consistent with any known atmospheric or optical effect. I would strongly advise against further investigation or publication. Some phenomena attract attention that you do not want. Please take this warning seriously." The letter was unsigned. The return address was a post office box that, when Gregory investigated, had been closed for over a decade. Gregory Fairbanks Wright did not publish the photographs, but he did share them with a small number of researchers, collectors, and journalists over the following years. Several expressed interest in acquiring them for study or display. In 2014, he agreed to loan the photographs to a private collector who specialized in anomalous imagery. The collector, who has never been publicly identified, maintains an archive of photographs, films, and documents related to unexplained phenomena. Access to the archive is restricted. Viewing is by appointment only, and visitors are required to sign non-disclosure agreements. The Caspian Lake photographs are reportedly among the most requested items in the collection. They are also among the most restricted. According to one researcher who viewed them in 2017, the collector has declined multiple offers to purchase the images, including one reportedly in the 6 figures. He said they were too important to sell, the researcher recounted, and too dangerous to display. I asked him what he meant by dangerous. He said that some images show things that are meant to be seen, and some show things that are not. He believed these photographs were the second kind. The researcher was permitted to view the photographs for approximately 10 minutes. She was not permitted to photograph them or take notes. "They're exactly as described," she said. "Aurora lights reflected in the lake, clear sky above. Beautiful, impossible. And looking at them, I felt something I can't quite describe. Like I was seeing something I shouldn't see, like the photograph was looking back." Caspian Lake remains one of Vermont's most pristine bodies of water. The summer community continues to gather each year, preserving traditions that stretch back over a century. The cottages along the shore are maintained by generations of families who value the town's quietude and discretion. No one speaks publicly about the photograph. The older residents who remember Wallace Fairbanks remember him as a kind and thoughtful man, a serious scholar, a careful observer. They do not remember him as someone prone to fantasy or exaggeration. They remember that he stopped going out on his dock at night after 1986. They remember that he sold his telescope in 1988. They remember that when asked about the stars or the sky, he would change the subject with a politeness that did not invite further questions. The lake freezes each winter and thaws each spring. Its surface reflects the sky above, clouds, sun, moon, stars, as it has for thousands of years. But on the night of September 14, 1986, it reflected something else, a sky that was not there, colors that had no source, an aurora that existed only in the water. Wallace Fairbanks photographed it. He sought explanations. He found none. And then he locked the photographs away and spent the remaining 17 years of his life not speaking about what he had seen. The reflection preceded the reality, or perhaps the reality existed somewhere else in some other sky, and the lake was a window rather than a mirror. No one knows. The photographs remain in their private collection, viewed by few, understood by none, and Caspian Lake keeps its secrets, as it always has, still, deep, reflecting a sky that may or may not exist, waiting, perhaps, to show someone else what was never there. It followed them, it kept its distance, and then it stopped, as if it knew where its territory ended. The Long Trail is the oldest long-distance hiking path in the United States, stretching 272 miles from the Massachusetts border to the Canadian frontier along the spine of Vermont's Green Mountains. Completed in 1930, the trail traverses some of the most rugged terrain in New England. Steep ascents, exposed ridgelines, and dense boreal forest that can disorient even experienced hikers. Maintaining the trail requires year-round effort. Each summer, crews of volunteers and seasonal workers hike into remote sections to clear blowdowns, repair erosion damage, and rebuild the wooden shelters that provide refuge for through hikers. The work is physically demanding and often isolating. Crews may spend days without seeing another person, sleeping in lean-tos miles from the nearest road. In September of 2007, a 4-person maintenance crew was assigned to a section of trail near Camel's Hump, Vermont's third highest peak. Their task was to repair water damage to a stretch of trail between Bamforth Ridge and the Winooski River Valley. The crew consisted of a team leader, 2 seasonal workers, and a volunteer, all experienced backcountry hikers with multiple seasons of trail work between them. What happened on the evening of September 8th has never been officially explained. The crew filed an incident report with the Green Mountain Club, the organization that maintains the Long Trail. The report was acknowledged but never investigated. The crew members have spoken about their experience only reluctantly and only to a handful of researchers and journalists. Their accounts are consistent, their photographs are unexplainable, and the light they describe has never been identified. The crew had spent 3 days working on the Bamforth Ridge section, camping at a primitive site approximately 4 miles from the nearest trailhead. On September 8th, they completed their repairs ahead of schedule and decided to hike out that evening rather than spend another night in the backcountry. They departed camp at approximately 5:45 in the afternoon, expecting to reach the parking area at Duxbury Road before full dark. The weather was clear, the temperature mild, and the trail conditions good. The team leader, a woman named Sarah Okonkwo, set a steady pace. By 7:15, the sun had dropped below the ridge line to the west. By 7:30, the forest was dark enough to require headlamps. The crew continued without incident, following the white blazes that marked the trail. At approximately 7:45, the volunteer at the rear of the group, a man named Peter Lindholm, noticed a light behind them. His account, provided in a 2012 interview, describes the moment. "I thought it was another hiker at first, a headlamp maybe, someone moving fast and catching up to us. But the light was wrong. It wasn't white like a headlamp. It was red. And it wasn't bobbing up and down like someone walking. It was steady, perfectly steady, just floating there, maybe 3 feet off the ground." Lindholm alerted the others. All 4 crew members stopped and turned to look. The light was approximately 40 feet behind them, hovering in the center of the trail. It was red, approximately the size of a tennis ball, and emitted a soft glow that illuminated nothing around it. It made no sound. "We stood there for maybe 30 seconds just watching it," said Marcus Reinhold, one of the seasonal workers. "Nobody spoke. I think we were all waiting for it to do something. Move toward us, move away, blink out. But it just hovered there, completely still." Okonkwo made the decision to continue hiking. She reasoned that whatever the light was, standing in the dark would not help them understand it. The crew resumed their descent toward the trailhead. The light followed. Over the next 90 minutes, the crew covered approximately 3 miles of trail. The light maintained a constant distance behind them, always 40 feet, regardless of their pace. "We tested it," said Reinhold. "Sarah had us speed up, then slow down, then stop completely. Every time we changed our pace, the light adjusted. When we walked faster, it moved faster. When we stopped, it stopped. It was like it was tethered to us, like there was an invisible string connecting us." The light never deviated from the trail. When the path curved, the light curved. When the trail descended steeply, the light descended. It maintained its height of approximately 3 feet above the ground throughout. "It never got closer," said Lindholm. "That's what I kept thinking. If it wanted to catch us, it could have. We weren't moving that fast, but it stayed exactly 40 feet back, like that was the rule, like it wasn't allowed to get any closer." The 4th crew member, a woman named Jennifer Tsao, was carrying a digital camera and took several photographs during the descent. She photographed the light from various distances and angles, always turning briefly to aim the camera before resuming her hike. "I wanted documentation," she said in a 2014 interview. "I knew nobody would believe us without evidence. So I kept shooting, even though I was scared, even though every instinct told me to just run." The photograph showed a distinct red point of light against the dark background of the forest. The light appeared in every frame, consistent with the crew's descriptions, approximately 3 feet above the ground, positioned in the center of the trail, maintaining its distance. The crew reached the Duxbury Road parking area at approximately 9:15 in the evening. Their vehicles were the only ones in the lot, and then the light stopped. The parking lot was bordered by a strip of grass and then the forest edge, where the trees began again beyond the maintained area. The crew walked to their vehicles, parked approximately 50 feet from the trail terminus. Lindholm was the last to leave the trail. He turned to look behind him one final time. "The light had stopped at the tree line," he said, "right at the edge of the forest. It hovered there for maybe 10 seconds, and then it went out, not gradually, instantly, like someone had flipped a switch." The crew stood in the parking lot for several minutes, watching the dark trees. The light did not reappear. "We didn't talk much," said Okonkwo. "We just got in our cars and left. I think we were all in shock. I know I was." The 4 crew members drove separately to Waterbury, where they had rented rooms for the week. They met at a diner the following morning to discuss what they had seen. It was during this conversation that Tsao discovered the anomaly in her photographs. "I was scrolling through the images on my camera," she said, showing everyone what I'd captured. "And Marcus noticed the timestamps. Every single photo I took after we saw the light was time-stamped exactly 1 hour ahead of the actual time. The timestamp on the first photograph showing the light read 8:47 in the evening. According to the crew's best estimate, the photo had been taken at approximately 7:47, 1 hour earlier. The camera had been accurate all week, Tsao continued. I'd been taking photos every day, and the timestamps matched. But starting with the first photo of the light, everything was exactly 60 minutes off. Not 59 minutes, not 61, exactly 60. Tsao's camera was a consumer-grade digital model with no known history of malfunctions. She had not adjusted the time settings. The camera's internal clock showed the correct time when she checked it the following morning. It wasn't a glitch, she said. Glitches don't offset by exactly 1 hour. Something changed the timestamps, something precise. The crew filed an incident report with the Green Mountain Club on September 10, 2007. The report described the light, its behavior, and the timestamp anomaly. It requested guidance on whether the incident should be reported to other authorities. A staff member acknowledged the report by email. No further communication was received. Okonkwo followed up twice over the following month. Her emails were not answered. When she called the club's office in November, a receptionist told her that the matter had been reviewed and that no further action was warranted. She asked who had reviewed it. The receptionist did not know. She asked what conclusion had been reached. The receptionist said she was not authorized to discuss it. The incident report has never been made public. A researcher who filed a Freedom of Information Act request in 2016 was informed that the Green Mountain Club, as a private nonprofit organization, was not subject to public records laws. The photographs remain in Tsao's possession. She has shared them with a small number of researchers, but has declined all requests to publish or display them publicly. People can believe me or not, she said. I know what we saw. I know what the camera recorded, and I know that something followed us down that mountain for 3 miles and then stopped exactly where the forest ended, like it couldn't leave, or like it chose not to. Camel's Hump remains one of the most popular hiking destinations in Vermont. Thousands of people ascend its summit each year via the Long Trail and various connecting paths. The trail maintenance continues, season after season, crews hiking into remote sections to repair the damage of weather and use. None of the 4 crew members from September of 2007 have returned to the Bamforth Ridge section. Okonkwo left the trail maintenance program in 2008. Reinhold moved to Colorado. Lindholm still hikes, but avoids the long trail north of Route 2. Tsao continues to carry a camera on every hike. She checks the timestamps obsessively, comparing them against her phone, her watch, any available reference. I keep waiting for it to happen again, she said. For the time to slip, for something to follow me out of the woods. It hasn't happened, but I don't think that means it won't. The Long Trail winds northward through forests that have stood for centuries, past peaks that were ancient before humans walked this continent. Hikers pass through daily, chasing sunsets, escaping routines, seeking something they cannot name. Most of them never see anything unusual. Most of them hike out before dark. But some, a few, linger too long. They watch the shadows lengthen. They feel the temperature drop, and they notice perhaps a light in the distance, a red glow hovering just above the trail, 40 feet back, maintaining its distance. It followed the crew for 3 miles. It stopped at the edge of the forest. It changed the time on every photograph by exactly 1 hour, and then it vanished, leaving only questions and a darkness that no headlamp could illuminate. The forest has its rules. The light knows them, and somewhere on the Long Trail, in the hours after sunset, something is still watching, still waiting, still following, 40 feet behind. The dead do not glow, but something beneath them does. Old West Church Cemetery occupies a hillside in the town of Calais, Vermont, overlooking a shallow valley where the Kingsbury Branch winds through pastures and second-growth forest. The cemetery dates to 1793, when the first settlers cleared the land and buried their dead on the highest ground they could find, safe from flooding, visible from the village, close to the church that would be built the following year. The church is gone now, destroyed by fire in 1876 and never rebuilt. But the cemetery remains, maintained by a small trust, funded by descendants of the original families. Approximately 300 graves occupy the hillside, their markers ranging from rough field stones bearing only initials to elaborate Victorian monuments carved with angels and willows. 7 of these markers are different. They are not distinguished by their design or their age. They are not clustered together or aligned in any obvious pattern. They bear names from different families, different decades, different generations. To a casual visitor, they would be indistinguishable from the hundreds of other headstones scattered across the hillside. But on certain nights, cold nights, when the temperature drops below 15 degrees Fahrenheit, the groundskeepers know which 7 to watch, because on those nights, the stones begin to glow. The phenomenon was first documented in 1951 in a letter written by the cemetery's caretaker, a man named Harold Johansen, to the chairman of the cemetery trust. "I am writing to report an unusual occurrence observed on the night of January 14th, Johansen wrote. "While conducting a perimeter check at approximately 9 in the evening, I noticed a pale green light emanating from several headstones in the northwest section. Upon closer inspection, I determined that the light was visible through cracks and fissures in the stone itself, as if something beneath the surface were illuminated." Johansen identified 7 affected markers. He noted the temperature, 8 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sky conditions, clear with no moon. He examined the stones carefully, but could find no external source for the light. The luminescence appeared to originate from within the stone, or possibly from below it, he continued. It was steady, not flickering, and approximately the brightness of a candle flame viewed through frosted glass. I observed the phenomenon for approximately 45 minutes before returning to my residence. When I checked again at midnight, the light had ceased. The trust chairman, a lawyer named Edmund Prescott, replied with a brief note acknowledging the report and suggesting that Johansen had observed phosphorescent decay of organic material, a natural phenomenon sometimes observed in old graveyards. He recommended no further action. Johansen did not argue, but he continued to observe. Over the following 12 years, he documented the phenomenon on 23 separate occasions. His notes, discovered in the cemetery's maintenance shed after his death in 1964, reveal a meticulous record of dates, temperatures, and observations. The glow appeared only when the temperature dropped below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. It appeared only on the same 7 headstones. It appeared only at night, typically between 8 in the evening and 2 in the morning. It was always pale green, always steady, always visible through the natural cracks and weathering in the stone. Johansen's final entry, dated November of 1963, contains a detail he had not previously recorded. "Tonight, I placed my hand against the Whitmore stone during the illumination. The stone was warm, not hot, but distinctly warmer than the surrounding air. This should not be possible. The temperature was 11 degrees. Stone does not retain heat in such conditions. Something beneath is generating warmth." He died the following spring. His notes were filed away and forgotten for 3 decades. The phenomenon continued to be observed sporadically by subsequent caretakers, though none documented it as thoroughly as Johansen. Most dismissed it as a trick of moonlight or starlight reflecting off ice crystals in the stone. One caretaker, who served from 1972 to 1979, reportedly refused to enter the cemetery after dark during winter months, but never explained why. In 1994, the Cemetery Trust hired a new groundskeeper, a retired geology teacher named Francis Okello, who had moved to Calais from Massachusetts. Okello approached the position with scientific curiosity, and when she first observed the glowing headstones in January of 1995, she did not dismiss what she saw. She documented the phenomenon with photographs and detailed notes. She identified the same 7 markers that Johansen had recorded 4 decades earlier. She confirmed the temperature threshold and the timing. And she did something Johansen had not done. She took soil samples. Using a hand auger, Okello extracted soil from the base of each of the 7 headstones, as well as control samples from nearby graves that did not exhibit the phenomenon. She stored the samples in sealed containers and sent them to the University of Vermont's Geology Department for analysis. The initial results were unremarkable. The soil composition was consistent with the surrounding area. Glacial till, slightly acidite, rich in organic matter from decades of leaf fall and decay. But one anomaly emerged. Trace amounts of an unidentified compound were present in all 7 samples from the glowing graves and absent from all control samples. The compound was phosphorescent. When exposed to ultraviolet light in the laboratory, it emitted a pale green glow matching Okello's photographs. The geology department could not identify the compound. It did not match any known mineral or organic phosphor in their reference databases. They recommended sending the samples to a federal laboratory with more sophisticated analytical equipment. Okello agreed. In March of 1995, the samples were shipped to a Department of Energy laboratory in Tennessee. They were never returned. Okello received a form letter in May of 1995 acknowledging receipt of the samples and stating that analysis was ongoing. She followed up in August, October, and December. Each inquiry received the same response: analysis ongoing, results forthcoming. In February of 1996, she received a different letter. This one was brief and unsigned, printed on plain paper with no letterhead. The samples you submitted have been classified as materials of interest under federal regulation. They have been retained for further study. No results will be released. Please do not submit additional inquiries regarding this matter. Okello contacted her representative in Congress, requesting assistance in recovering her samples or obtaining the analysis results. A staffer responded that the matter had been referred to the appropriate agencies and that no further information was available. She contacted the University of Vermont, asking if they had retained any portion of the samples. They had not. She attempted to collect new samples in the winter of 1996. The soil at the base of the 7 headstones had been disturbed, not by her auger holes, which she had carefully filled, but by what appeared to be a more systematic excavation. Approximately 6 inches of soil had been removed from around each marker and replaced with fresh fill. Someone had collected the remaining material before she could. Okello resigned as groundskeeper in 1997. She moved back to Massachusetts and has declined all requests for interviews regarding her experience. Her photographs remain in the Cemetery Trust's files. They show exactly what she described: 7 headstones glowing pale green against the dark hillside, the light visible through cracks and weathered surfaces, as if something beneath were trying to shine through. Here the 7 markers bear names that span nearly a century of burials. Elijah Whitmore died 1809. Patience Connolly died 1831. Samuel Gustafson died 1847. Margaret Ouellet died 1862. Thomas Baranova died 1879. Catherine Pemberton died 1893. William Lindstrom died 1904. They share no obvious connection. They were not related by blood or marriage. They did not die in the same manner or during the same epidemic. Their graves are scattered across the cemetery, separated by dozens of other markers. Historical research has revealed only fragments. Whitmore was a farmer who served in the Revolutionary War. Connolly was a midwife who delivered over 200 children in the Calais area. Gustafsson was a Swedish immigrant who worked as a blacksmith. Uele was a schoolteacher who never married. Baranova was a traveling merchant who settled in Calais in his final years. Pemberton was a widow who outlived her husband by 37 years. Lindstrom was a carpenter who built many of the homes still standing in the village. Ordinary lives, ordinary deaths. Nothing in the historical record explains why these 7 out of 300 would be marked by the glow. A genealogist who examined the records in 2008 found one possible connection. All 7 individuals died in months when the temperature had dropped below 15 degrees Fahrenheit for extended periods. Whitmore in January, Connolly in February, Gustafsson in December, and so on. But thousands of Vermonters have died during cold months. The connection, if it is one, explains nothing. The current groundskeeper, who took over in 2012, has observed the phenomenon on 11 occasions. He has photographed it, documented it, and shared his observations with the Cemetery Trust. He has not taken soil samples. He has not contacted laboratories. He has not attempted to investigate the source of the glow. "I read Francis Okello's files when I took the job," he said in a 2020 interview, speaking on condition of anonymity. "I know what happened to her samples. I know someone came and took the soil. I don't know who, and I don't want to know." He paused. "Whatever is down there, someone in the government knows about it. They've known since at least '95, maybe longer. And they decided the rest of us shouldn't know. That tells me everything I need to understand." He continues to maintain the cemetery, clearing brush, straightening fallen stones, filling the depressions that form as old coffins collapse beneath the earth. He does this work during daylight hours, finishing well before sunset. On nights when the temperature drops below 15 degrees, he stays home. He does not check the cemetery. He does not photograph the glow. "The stones know I'm watching," he said. "They've always known. And whatever is making them glow, whatever is down there under the ground waiting, it knows too." Old West Church Cemetery remains open to visitors during daylight hours. The hillside offers a panoramic view of the Kingsbury Branch Valley, and the old headstones provide a tangible connection to Vermont's earliest European settlers. Historians and genealogists visit occasionally, tracing family lines and documenting inscriptions worn smooth by 2 centuries of weather. No signs indicate which 7 markers are different. No plaques explain what happens on cold winter nights. The Cemetery Trust does not acknowledge the phenomenon publicly, and the current groundskeeper's contract includes a clause prohibiting discussion of unusual occurrences with media or researchers. But the stones remain. Elijah Whitmore, Patience Connolly, Samuel Gustafsson, Margaret Uele, Thomas Baranova, Catherine Pemberton, William Lindstrom. 7 names, 7 graves, 7 markers that glow pale green when the temperature drops below 15 degrees, illuminated by something that science could not identify and the government chose not to explain. The samples are gone. The analysis was never released. The soil has been replaced. But the glow continues, steady, patient, warm to the touch in the coldest nights of winter. Something beneath the cemetery is still glowing. Something is still waiting. And every winter, when the cold settles over Calais and the stars burn bright above the frozen hills, 7 headstones light up like lanterns, marking graves that hold more than bones, more than memory, more than the ordinary dead. The groundskeepers know, the government knows, and now perhaps you know too. But knowing changes nothing. The glow will come again. It always does. And whatever lies beneath those 7 stones will continue its patient, luminous vigil, waiting for something that may never come or something that already has. The mountain has always watched back. Glastonbury Mountain rises to 3,748 feet in the remote southwestern corner of Vermont, deep within the Bennington Triangle, a region that earned its name from a series of unexplained disappearances between 1945 and 1965-1950. 5 people vanished from the mountain and its surrounding wilderness during that 5-year period. None were ever found, no bodies were recovered, no explanations were offered. The disappearances made Glastonbury infamous. Researchers, journalists, and curiosity seekers have examined the cases for decades, proposing theories ranging from serial killers to wild animals to supernatural forces. Books have been written, documentaries have been filmed. The mountain has become synonymous with mystery. But the disappearances are not Glastonbury's only secret. There is another phenomenon, older, quieter, and far less documented. A light that pulses in the darkness. A light that seems to know when it is being observed. A light that breathes. The fire tower on Glastonbury's summit has been abandoned since 1952. Its wooden cab has collapsed, its steel frame rusted to a deep orange. But the structure still stands, and those who climb its skeletal stairs can see for miles in every direction. The Green Mountains rolling northward, the Taconic Range to the west, the forests of the Bennington Triangle spreading below like a dark and endless sea. On clear winter nights, some of those who climb the tower see something else. A light, pulsing, somewhere in the forest below, and the light, they say, pulses in time with their breath. The earliest known account of the phenomenon dates to 1937, recorded in the logbook of a fire watcher named Clarence Dupuis. Dupuis staffed the Glastonbury Tower during the summer and fall months, scanning the horizon for smoke and recording weather observations. His entry for October 17, 1937 reads, "Clear night, temperature 28 degrees, wind calm. At approximately 2200 hours, observed unusual light in forest canopy approximately 1 mile southeast of tower. Light was white, steady pulse, visible for approximately 40 minutes. Could not determine source. Light appeared to pulse at regular intervals consistent with respiration." Dupuis noted the observation but offered no interpretation. His subsequent entries make no further mention of the light. He left the fire service in 1939 and died in 1967 without ever speaking publicly about what he had seen. The logbook was archived with the Vermont Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation. It was not examined by researchers until 2004, when a historian reviewing fire tower records discovered the entry. By then, the phenomenon had been observed by others. The 1940s disappearances overshadowed everything else associated with Glastonbury Mountain. Between November of 1945 and October of 1950, 5 people vanished. Mitty Rivers, a 74-year-old hunting guide, Paula Weldon, an 18-year-old college student, James Tedford, a veteran returning from a visit to relatives, Paul Jepson, an 8-year-old boy, and Frida Langer, a 53-year-old experienced hiker. The cases attracted national attention. Search parties combed the mountain for weeks. The FBI was consulted. Theories proliferated, but no trace of any victim was ever found, and no perpetrator was ever identified. The fire tower was decommissioned in 1952, officially due to the expansion of aerial fire detection. But former rangers who served during that period have suggested other reasons. A man named Robert Whitfield worked as a seasonal ranger in the Glastonbury area from 1948 to 1951. In a 1989 interview with a regional historian, Whitfield described an experience that he had never reported officially. "It was October of '49, he said. I was up in the tower doing a night check. We didn't usually staff it after dark, but there had been reports of poachers in the area. Clear night, cold, maybe 20 degrees. I was scanning the tree line with binoculars when I saw it." He described a white light visible through the forest canopy, approximately half a mile to the east. The light pulsed slowly and steadily. I watched it for maybe 15 minutes, Whitfield continued, and I started to notice something, the pulse. It matched my breathing. When I inhaled, the light brightened. When I exhaled, it dimmed. I thought I was imagining it, so I held my breath. The light held steady. I breathed out, and it dimmed. Whitfield descended from the tower and did not return that night. He reported the light to his supervisor the following day. "He told me not to put it in writing," Whitfield said. "He said others had seen it too. He said it was better not to talk about it. He said the mountain had enough problems without adding ghost stories." Whitfield complied. He completed his service and left the area in 1951. He never returned to Glastonbury. "That light knew I was watching," he said at the end of the interview. "I can't explain how, but it knew, and it was waiting for me to notice." He declined to elaborate further. He died in 2012 at the age of 87. Our dig of the fire tower ruins remain accessible via the West Ridge Trail, a steep 4-mile climb from the trailhead on Route 9. The trail is not maintained during winter months, and the final approach to the summit is often buried under several feet of snow. Few hikers attempt the climb between December and March. Those who do sometimes report seeing the light. A 2001 post on a hiking forum describes an observation from New Year's Eve of that year. "Climbed Glastonbury for a winter summit. Clear night, maybe 10 degrees, no wind. From the tower I could see a light in the trees below, white, pulsing slowly. I watched it for about 20 minutes. I noticed the pulse seemed to match my breathing. Tried changing my breath rate. Faster, slower. The light matched every time. Freaked me out. Descended in the dark," which I don't recommend. A 2009 account, shared with a paranormal research organization, provides additional detail. The light was approximately 1 mile from the tower, visible through gaps in the canopy. It was not a campfire. Wrong color, wrong behavior. It was not a flashlight. Too steady, too bright. It pulsed like a heartbeat, except it was my heartbeat, my breathing. When I became aware of the synchronization, I felt observed, not threatened, just watched. The light went out after approximately 30 minutes. It didn't fade. It simply stopped. A 2016 report from a solo winter camper describes the same phenomenon, but adds a troubling detail. "I saw the light from my campsite about 2 miles from the summit. I didn't climb the tower, too icy, but I could see it through the trees, pulsing white. I watched it for a long time, and at some point I realized I couldn't look away. I wanted to. I tried to, but my eyes wouldn't move. The light held me for maybe 5 minutes before it released. When it let go, I felt exhausted, like I had been running, like something had been taken from me." The camper hiked out the following morning and has not returned to Glastonbury. Attempts to investigate the phenomenon have been limited and inconclusive. In 2011, a group of researchers from a Massachusetts-based paranormal organization conducted a winter observation from the Glastonbury summit. They brought cameras, audio recorders, and instruments for measuring electromagnetic fields. Their report, published on their website, describes 3 nights of observation. On the first 2 nights, no anomalies were detected. On the 3rd night, January 15, 2011, they observed the light. The light appeared at approximately 21:30 hours, visible through the forest canopy to the southeast, the report states. It pulsed at a rate of approximately 12 to 15 cycles per minute. Team members independently reported that the pulse appeared synchronized with their own respiration. Attempts to photograph the light were unsuccessful. Digital cameras captured only darkness, despite the light being clearly visible to the naked eye. The team's audio recorders captured a low-frequency hum during the observation, approximately 19 hertz, below the threshold of normal human hearing. The hum was present only during the period when the light was visible. Infrasound at this frequency is associated with feelings of unease, disorientation, and the sense of being observed, the report notes. It is possible that the psychological effects reported by witnesses are attributable to this acoustic phenomenon. However, the source of the sound remains unidentified. The team descended the following morning. One member reported difficulty sleeping for several weeks afterward, describing recurring dreams of a light that followed me home. Glastonbury Mountain remains one of the most isolated peaks in Vermont. The ghost town of Glastonbury, once a logging community of over 200 residents, was abandoned in the 1930s and has been reclaimed by the forest. The only evidence of human habitation is a handful of cellar holes and stone foundations, barely visible beneath the undergrowth. The fire tower stands on the summit, its steel frame skeletal against the sky. The wooden cab has long since rotted away. The stairs are rusted but climbable for those willing to accept the risk. No official agency acknowledges the light. No signs warn hikers of unusual phenomena. The mountain's reputation rests entirely on the disappearances of the 1940s, events that have never been solved and likely never will be. But the light predates the disappearances. Clarence Dupuis saw it in 1937, 8 years before Midi Rivers vanished without a trace. And witnesses have continued to see it in the decades since. A pulsing white glow in the forest canopy, visible from the tower on clear winter nights, synchronized with the breathing of whoever watches. Some researchers have speculated about connections between the light and the disappearances. Others dismiss any such link as superstition. The truth, as with so much about Glastonbury, remains unknown. What is known is this: the light appears, it pulses, it matches the rhythm of the observer's breath as if it were reading something fundamental about whoever watches, their presence, their attention, their life force. And when it stops, it does not fade. It simply ends, as if a connection has been severed. Robert Whitfield called it a light that knew I was watching. He never explained what he meant. Perhaps he couldn't. Perhaps the light took that explanation with it, along with whatever else it takes from those who watch too long. Glastonbury Mountain keeps its secrets. The fire tower stands silent. The forest stretches dark and endless below. And somewhere in that darkness, on nights when the air is cold and the sky is clear, a light pulses white among the trees, breathing, watching, waiting. For the next person to climb the tower, for the next pair of eyes to meet its glow, for the next breath to match its rhythm. The mountain has always watched back. It is watching still.